Hello and welcome to episode 113 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg. Joining me, as always, is Neil.
Hello, Greg.
Hello, Neil. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Greg. How are you?
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. It's been a busy old time, but we'll talk about some of that as we go through, I think. First off, let's talk Element Games first. So, as usual, there's what we got coming out soon. We don't really know, do we? All the new Age of Sigmar stuff's coming out soon. We've got some Sylvaneth. I know some people are looking at getting some bits for their Demons of the Runestorm army. You never know. We might get some more new models. Who knows? If you want bits for your Titans, you want paint. Paint's a big one. We're going to have a whole new range of paints to buy soon if you want to.
Yes.
So you can get them all on pre-release weekend. Or week, should I say, at Element Games for 20% off and some of the best customer service online. Also, you've still got some time for the Versatile Terrain May offer, which is 25% off. I think it's 25% off. He says off the top of his head. But go and check them out. Name bases for anything, really. And other bits and pieces as well. Like a million different fonts by this. Keep seeing seems like there's a new one every couple of weeks, and they're really cool if you want your characters to stand out, or you have a display piece, or you're using them for naming your Titans to differentiate them on the battlefield. They're absolutely fantastic. So go and check out Versatile Terrain. So, Neil, has your week been all about the Golden Demon?
Yeah, pretty much. My previous couple of weeks were pretty much full on painting. I pushed myself a little bit too hard, too fast. I was doing like 12 hours of painting a day, and I think it took its toll eventually by turning up to Golden Demon feeling like a broken man and literally sitting down and not doing a lot with a massive headache. I think an 8-hour painting day is probably the most I think any sane human wants to probably go for. Any more than that, and it's just punishment to the body and eyes. So it was a tough one. Something I'm probably not going to want to repeat.
It might depend on what you're painting. I think if you're slapping down, just like these guys need to get done, I'm cracking on, then that's going to have less of a tiring effect maybe than concentrating on making sure your paint's going on precisely and everything else. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, so, it was very painful. It was a painful couple of weeks, and I'm glad it's over.
Okay, so you didn't get to enjoy much of Warhammer Fest then?
No, not really. I actually didn't get to go around and see anything at all, really. I very much dropped my models off, spoke to a few people, and then literally sort of wanted to curl up into a ball and die after that.
Oh, dear Lord.
And that's all I really did.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough, yeah. So it's... it happens at times, particularly when you get to the end of something and your body feels like you've stopped. The other half, Mrs. Truth, gets this occasionally where she works so hard, and then when she stops, her body goes, "Oh, you've chosen to rest," and just shuts down. And then there's like all the stuff that then comes from all that, which is it's one way of doing things, I suppose. Unfortunately, but yeah, it's something to be mindful of, people who are hobbying too much. And also as well, when you get like that, sometimes that puts you off then going back and hobbying.
Yeah, I must admit it was, I was very much looking forward to just getting some sleep by the time Sunday came. And I've had a couple of decent nights sleep now, so I do feel a bit more human, but it's nice to sort of take the foot off the gas, really, and sit back and relax a bit.
Yeah, sure thing. So your week's been taken up with that. I haven't been able to do as much hobby. So since last episode, we've done the paint course with Vince Venturella. That was it was quite interesting. I realised like quite early on, I think I'm like the least technically good painter in that room, and also the least like who finds painting the least enjoyable. And I think those two things are probably combined. One leads into the other. and vice versa as well. So it's always quite interesting when I'm in something like that where people are, oh, you can do this and do that. And I'm like, yeah, I'm just not, that's not my thing. And I know.
So, who were the sort of people that were with you on that course? Then were they sort of what sort of level would you say they were at?
Well, there's some newer gamers, but they and some people who've been painting for a long time who just wanted to expand their knowledge or look at different ways. Or sometimes I think it's as much a confidence thing as anything else. There were definitely people there who could paint. But so this course was about painting units and getting results. Not necessarily. So it was painting. Obviously, it's painting well, but also achieving those results without taking an age doing it. Were the kind of focuses of these things. So that we did a couple of things where he'd show us how to paint something, and then he'd do it with, stuff that's not. It's not like wet blending or to paint. Loaded brush technique. Things like that, stuff you can find online, but sometimes, seeing someone do it there and then. And we basically just went through and tried to paint the models that we'd taken with us. And there was other stuff as well. I'm not going to go into everything, obviously. We did a bit of airbrush work and stuff like that. And there were people there who were like, yeah, I'm happy with doing it like the first way. And now I need to maybe see if I can do it the way that you've then shown me. Maybe I will, maybe I won't, that kind of thing. So there was definitely a mix of people there. As I say, I think most of the people there had got an enjoyment from painting that I don't. Like, I've always said this, it's just some people say about parenting, they don't enjoy parenting, but they enjoyed having parented at the end of the day. I feel a little bit like that with painting. I enjoy seeing my army on the table. I don't necessarily thoroughly enjoy the process that gets me there.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah,
and that is, as I say, that is partly fed and partly feeds into the fact that I'm not the best painter in the world either. Halfway through the first day, I was like, right. Vince was coming around and he's like, okay, you need to. I'm like, I know what to do on this bit. I'm kind of happy with knowing what to do. My brush control needs to improve to do it. I can do it to a point. Certainly things like loaded brush. That's a brush control thing, right? I wasn't very good at it, and that's because I'm not very good with moving the brush around and the model and that kind of thing. And wet blending, one thing I don't do, and this will probably get quicker the more I kind of focused on trying to get quicker, is literally getting paint from, I've said it before, getting paint from the palette or wherever onto the model. So when you're then trying to you're trying to move paint around before it's dried, if you're not very quick, you make that job so much harder for yourself. So I could see where I was struggling and understood the principles, but I kind of I need to work on that if I'm going to do it that way. I mean, I would like to work on that anyway, but yes, that's all part of it. But it was good. I just, by the end of the Friday, as you say, painting for a long time, and I drove up to London for it's an hour and 45 drive and everything else. And then,
where was it being hosted?
Dark Sphere at Shepherd's Bush, which is a cool little venue and everything else. I also packed everything bar the power cord for my light, which made a difference because I was working under the light, which wasn't bad, but I didn't have a light for painting. And particularly,
that doesn't help.
No, for some of it was fine, but other bits it was, it was a major hindrance. But the end of the Saturday, I was starting to get a bit frustrated with it, and I could feel that. And I thought, I need to just kind of get up and stop doing this. I understand these principles. I know I should practice them now, but if I do, I'm just going to get more and more frustrated with the fact that it's not working, that I can't do it.
Yeah.
I've had enough kind of thing. So, that's fine. Yeah, I think you've got to know your limits as well. But I came out of that with a really good idea of kind of how I'm going to do the skin on my demons with an airbrush. Happy with it. I'm like, cool. I'm going to have loads of large areas of skin to do, and it'll be wonderful. And then what 20 minutes of playing around with contrast paints at Games Workshop, and was like, am I just going to do these instead? But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, it was good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And Vince is a good teacher, and Dev helping out there, and a good bunch of guys as well. Many of whom were on the previous course. I'm not too sure for me now if there are any other courses at the level I'm at that would be worth taking. I think, I'm not unintelligent, even though I may sound so on here. I understand a lot of the principles that go involved, and there's videos and things like that. And unless I get better and quicker, then, the rest of it doesn't really matter to me too much. So I think I've done enough as I need to do. Not to say that those other courses aren't valuable for people. I just think for me now, it's a case of, it's typical. I was like, right, got to make sure I come home, get that airbrush out, get those paints out and practice it. Haven't had time to do any of it. Absolutely any of it.
I mean, I think that's half the problem with these courses. You can sit in there and someone can tell you, and you go, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know exactly what you mean. Oh yeah, I'm gonna. But then unless you get straight on getting those processes to work, very very quickly that knowledge can sort of dissipate, and it becomes then ultimately a lot harder to try and replicate later on.
Yeah, I feel much more confident with this one that I'm kind of sorted and know what to do. And yeah, you can go out and then find those videos. Like once you've had that explained, those videos then become that much more useful. So I feel confident in that. I need to put an order in of some paints because I haven't got necessarily the ones that I now want to use. Not that I'm going to go out. It was quite funny. There's times when, every painter has their thing, their paints, their style and everything else. Particularly one was the metals, and it was a Vallejo metal colour, I think is the one that Vince loves. And yeah, sure enough, within about 3 minutes of him saying, I use these only, don't bother with anything else, blah, 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 Darksphere had run out of the silver and gold, and I looked at it and I appreciate what he did with those paints, and I looked at the way that I paint and thought, yeah, I could go and get them, but actually I think I might be happy doing them the way I'm doing. That's not to dismiss what he does at all, but and then on the other side of that contrast thing, this was one of those things where I'm like, yeah, actually, I think the way contrasts work, I could utilise methods from there to do those kind of things without all the faff. But yes. we shall see, because I think we'll talk about contrast in just a second. Anything else been going on? I've got a large order of Demons of the Ruinstorm. So my Inferni, I put some pictures up on Facebook and Twitter. I've got Malazan. He's built the Forge World dude. He's all sorted on his base. I then got bodies of bags of resin turn up for my other demons, and there's a lot that you don't really need instructions, to be honest. But when they come with no instructions, it's like, it's a bit of a shock to the system. And then I've got the sculpts are good, the models are good. They're a level below Forge World, in my opinion, in terms of the quality of the resin. Some people might disagree on that. And
what sculpts or resin quality did you say there?
A little bit both. Not to say that there aren't some that are better than some Forge. There are some Forge World models that aren't great, but I feel that maybe if it was Forge World, a few more of the pieces might have little tabs. So one thing they do, they've got Krull, and there's basically the same model with or without wings, but the wing, where the wings glue onto the body, doesn't change between those models. It's literally the same body, which is kind of like fine, but that means that then the wings don't have a tab to sit in. So you're gluing flat to flat. So what I might do is glue them on, and then pin them that way. Like then drill a pin in through the combined lot, because that's so much easier than trying to line up a pin and stuff like that. And then there's like when the hands on one of the other models, there's a small kind of there's a small protrusion that can sit in a little bit, but it's not like here's a peg that sits in a peg. They do have some bits of that, but not everywhere. But they're good. They're not. It's not like Forge World are perfect with the way they have done some of their models. But it's cool. I suppose
it's a standardised way that Forge World operate, do a lot of their models and how they create them, so you get indoctrinated into knowing that how these bits generally go together and how they.
It's the little things a lot of the time. So, so far, all the heads for the big guys are all flat head onto flat neck, and you just know with Forge World that wouldn't happen now. That would be a staggered head, or would have a square peg with a square hole. You would have something, and then when they line up, there are maybe like you expect with resin that not everything's going to be perfect on large models like this, but maybe there's slightly more gappy than I would expect. In fact, this guy, his arms are straight, flat onto flat as well. That's disappointing, actually. That's all three of the real big guys, which is a shame. Maybe some of the other models I've done are newer sculpts and they've adapted that. So there might be a little bit more pinning than I first thought. But it depends on if the arms come straight out, it's not going to be easy to do. But we'll see. We'll see how we go with that. But there's a lot of models that I've then got to build and then get sprayed up and get painting. They've got to join the queue, because I've got... I need to put up I need to start working on, but I've got a whole Zone Mortalis board's worth of terrain to get built and painted, or magnetised and painted before the event in Cardiff. And I'll be putting photos of that online as well as I go, because that's all basically some guys have sponsored a whole table's worth and gave me a good deal on those, so we can have make sure there's one dedicated at least for it's not Forge World, but with proper walls, 3D printed stuff, so much better in my opinion than cardboard or MDF for that kind of thing. So I wanted to make sure that that's done for that event. But yeah,
cool.
So yeah, I've been doing that kind of stuff, and there's plenty more. Fingers crossed this weekend we can get on and actually do some building and painting. You never know. But talking about Cardiff, a reminder, if you wish to come, 24th and 5th of August, the bank holiday weekend in Cardiff, the Wrecking of Dalen Prime. You can find all the links in the show notes, and £40 for 2 days of gaming and food, lunch at least, and lots of fun, I hope. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But I think we're pretty much on to all the stuff that's been happening. We might as well just jump straight into Fest, I think. So you didn't get to experience much of Fest itself?
No, in fact, extremely little of Fest. I think I just pretty much stayed on the same floor and was only there for a few hours and then left. What
time did you roll up?
I got there just before the doors opened. I think it was about 9:40, something like that. I think it opened at 10.
Okay.
And there's a humongous queue, joined that, and it moved quite quickly, and sort of just went straight upstairs and got my models in the cabinet. So that was obviously the first thing to do.
Right. So just especially for Chris, he turned up on the Saturday, and we somehow got to near the front of the queue. Thank God, because as we walked in, the gift bags hadn't been made up, and we were like handed a bag and told to take one of everything that was on the table that was there.
Oh, right.
Yeah, which meant that some people were queuing for an hour and some odd to get in. It was pretty appalling. And someone, I think I was on I think it was the Independent Characters Discord, and someone said, or a Facebook page, somewhere like that, and someone said kind of like, oh, well, you expect kind of, these things happen at these events. And I'm like, we've been saying a similar thing now for quite a few events, like the organisation up front. They all should have been done. Like, why were those bags not all done beforehand? Like,
yeah, and I must admit, on the Sunday they were, and the queue, they did everyone's tickets and bags before it opened, and it was just like a steady stream of people rolled in the door.
Yeah, at
10 o'clock, it was really slick.
Yeah, there were,
but that's obviously probably from the hindsight of the previous day, and
yes, these things happen. But then, so we walked in, and then we were like, right, let's get some seminar tickets. And we walked around, and there was this huge queue going up the middle of the main hall and then coming back on itself. And I was like, dude, I think this is seminar tickets. So I walked up, what are you queuing for your seminar tickets? I was like, yeah, I'm not queuing again. Like, it's not happening. And walked off. So
I heard people couldn't get into a lot of seminars.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, so on the Saturday, I think for the coming soon or whatever, the 40k one, I think you needed a ticket. But for Heresy Q&A, it was in the larger room, and there was, a fifth the seats were taken up. So, like, if you queued up for a ticket and were just doing that and something else, like, which you didn't need to then queue up for, that would have been annoying.
Mm.
So, I almost think stuff tickets, just like if people are going to queue like that, just let them queue, before the event. Like, do the whole. I suppose it's a bit tricky, but part of me thinks, right, just tell people at the end of every seminar, everyone must leave, and then there will be a queue. And you know what? People will pick which ones they go to, because the other thing is, you get a seminar ticket and don't go, then someone's going to be hanging around to get in to fill it up. Someone's going to be hanging around anyway. So
yeah,
and then you might think, okay, well, I definitely want to watch this seminar, so that's my most important one. So I won't go to the one before it in a different place because I want to be like. And then maybe that stops someone hogging, because someone did say that you were only allowed one or two, but then other people had loads around their wrists. It just, I don't know if there's a good way of doing it, but
I must admit, I don't like that whole wristband system because I just think it's really flawed, and I don't think it's particularly good.
You could have.
I think if you pay, the thing is, I know that I spoke to Andy Wardle, and he went for both days for the one main thing that he wanted to go to some Age of Sigmar seminars,
right.
And when he got there, he then couldn't get into any of them. And he was like, "Oh, that's the reason I came for the Saturday and the Sunday."
Yeah.
And then, that's a bit tough, isn't it? When you go to these things to go to seminars and you can't actually physically get in.
Yeah, they did. They did do was it the gold tickets or whatever, where you could walk into any. I didn't really pay any attention to it, but apparently you could get you paid X amount and got one of all the limited staff, and you could get into any seminar and stuff. But I must admit, I looked at the seminars and was like, there's so many of them that I almost don't want to bother. And it was only because I saw a nudge and he said that the Book 8 seminar wasn't actually necessarily going to be as much about Book 8, that I went to that one and got some chat about Book 9. So, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what they do, because at the end of the day, the big ones, the what's coming soon, they're always going to be packed. Maybe you just ticket them. Maybe everything else you leave. You just pick those one or two big ones and ticket them, and everything else, it's like, well, turn up. But
see what happens. I mean, I must admit, you know what you said about previous events where they put the community team put all the pictures up.
Yeah.
As soon as obviously they put them up. For me, the Saturday was very much like every so often, check the phone, have a quick look on the website. Oh, look, that's new, or oh, that's coming out. And that, to be honest, is all I really need at some of those ones, because I don't feel a need to be in those when they're just going to put the all of the good pictures you can then like open up on your phone and zoom into, rather than looking on a poor quality projector screen. So, for me, I was just like, yeah, fine.
Yeah,
I'm absolutely happy that that there's all these people are in there. They can be in there all day long, as far as I'm concerned.
And the other thing is,
I'll
as well,
look at it on the website.
The Q&As in those seminars are all, half the questions are when's the next Primark coming out for 40k, or or when are you going to do this, and those questions that are never going to get answered. And once you've been to enough of these things, you tend to expect them. There are very few useful questions that come out of those, so I'm not that bothered by that either. And to be honest, the useful ones do most of the time get spread around anyway. So yeah, for that value of it, I'm not that bothered then if I don't get in to those. It also means it's a good time to go and look at other stuff. But yeah, we're cool. We'll move on from that. Contrast paint. You didn't get a chance to play with this at all?
No, I didn't. I spoke to some people about it, and obviously I'd already heard about it previously.
Yeah.
So I spoke to some of the heavy metal team about its uses, and it was obviously a very vague response of, yeah, well, we've sort of used it, and we think it could be good for metallics and stuff like this. But I was trying to gauge an opinion of how useful it is on a higher end sort of painting. And the impression I got, which is obviously they're probably not trying to say, is that actually it is it's a paint formulated for getting armies knocked out, getting low level paint jobs, just get it to a serviceable looking state and get it out on the table. So for high end painting, it was not really a major tool. And it was like they were to say, so how much do you need to thin them? Oh, you need to thin it a lot if you want to make it a glaze. And well, if you have to thin it too much, it sort of, you ask the question, well, why would I just not use something else? Yeah. So I from what I spoke to people about, I thought, I don't know how much use these would ever be to me. So it was a case that I think they're a very good invention for, the tournament player, for the person that wants to get their army done quickly, but I can't see me having any use for them per se.
Right, yeah. So someone I know did speak to a heavy metal paper. Don't tell us who told you your answer. Someone I know spoke to a heavy metal painter, and they said, yes, we'll be using the flesh wash. It cuts out about 2 or 3 steps. The flesh colour. Guilliman, maybe, one of them. Again, I don't know how much of that's a professional answer and how much of that's truth or what have you. Certainly so the common answer is, because it's created a bit of an interesting kind of reaction. First off, Army Painter do something like this, don't they? There's been some people going, oh, it's just the Army Painter thing. From what I understand, and I don't know, so this is me grabbing information from little sources, the Army Painter one works. This one works better. So it's not wholly innovative or anything like that. GW will always try and sell you on that, because that's what companies do. But its simplicity of use and everything else is pretty good. I sat down and played with a couple. First thing to note, so the principle is you have these 2 sprays, and then you can just thickly splash this stuff off, and it will run into recesses and create shade, but also paint your model in the top colour as well, in the mid-tone probably, because a lot of people will highlight off of it. And you can do that in one coat. Yes, you can. You're right. The army painter, the person who doesn't enjoy painting or doesn't want to spend that time painting, who just needs their models painted, it's pretty good for. I also think it's a good base for people who are a level or two up in terms of. I looked at it, so yeah, my first thought was when I just took a plague zombie and painted every part of him red just to see how that same colour worked in different bits and things like that. And for that second, I was like, right, I'm going to paint all my Khorne demons, my Crimson Fury demons in this red. And then about 20 minutes afterwards, I was like, no, I'm not, because it's a very different effect, and I actually don't want that effect. And I would still have to go in and work over it. So I'm going to use the airbrush method that I know I want to use. But there's no reason why you can't paint that and then go over the top of it and highlight it. They gave a shed load of people in the company an army to paint and a week and contrast paints and things like Adam Hall painted a Seraphon army with lots of big monsters, and there's lots of scales, there's lots of indentations on the model, and it works perfectly for them. Like, just splash it on and away you go. There was a model of a Wraith Knight, and you're like, the big flat areas, they've got the flow medium thing, which apparently helps, but it's less effective, I believe, on those larger areas. And the idea of these spray cans you get with it are, I touched a model that was just sprayed, and it feels like you're touching the plastic. They're that smooth. I mean,
yeah, I have heard good things about the sprays. I must admit, the sprays actually are really good.
Yeah. So my first thought we heard about this a little while ago, not too long ago, but a little while ago. My first thought was, well, I'm an undercoat in black kind of guy. I can let my mistakes hide in that shadow and things like that. And I don't want to paint everything bright colours. But Andy Hoare upstairs had 10 Heresy Marines sprayed silver and then used like the Drukai purple-ish colour over them. I was like, yeah, I'm happy with these as my Emperor's Children. And I'm like, okay. So, yes, because of the nature of what they are, they can ink or glaze or whatever, the terminology is. I'll probably pick the wrong one. You can do other stuff with them as well. You're not limited to just that method. The one thing I found painting a Stormcast was, so the problem is, to work, they obviously stain the model. So if you use the process and you spray them one of the two light colours, you get in, if your brush touches, if you get paint on a bit of the model you don't want that colour, you then have to go in and paint over it with the base coat again, with a prime coat, to then colour it. It's not like you can't just apply another colour over the top to hide it, because that's not the way the paints work. So if you've got one of those cloaks where it's moulded that you have to get in to paint, and you're going to touch the other side, like, it's going to be annoying. Your brush control has to be half decent in those circumstances. But, that's like, that going in, I suppose. That's another one of those things. But I think there's a lot of potential to use these for lots of levels of painters. There have been the odd person online, and this guy. So these aren't the answers to all your prayers. They're not, and I don't think they're. Can you paint an army in 2 days? Yes, people did it at Games Workshop, and it looks good. Right, it's not going to set the world alight. You're not going to win a painting competition, but it looks good, and there are people I know who have said they might go to events now for 40k or Age of Sigmar or whatever, because they might actually finish an army because they don't like painting.
Yeah, they think they could probably go, okay, yeah, well, I'll just get that smashed out. I'll smash that out in a week, and I'll just use the contrast paints, and I'll just do all this colour bosh.
Yeah, so that's a good thing. Then you've got the people who are like, oh, I'm going to jump on these. They're going to speed me up. I'm going to be able to get more of what I've got painted. So that's a good thing. You then got the people who are like, actually, for my complicated paint scheme, this, again, as I say, this takes out 2 steps, because you don't even have to put it on in one thick coat, right? You can put it on in 2 thin coats. You can build up the layers to where you want it. You can do lots of things. It's a tool at the end of the day. You can use it however you wish to use it. So there are people who are like, yeah, I can see I can do this technique, I could do that, and that's going to save me time and hassle and effort. So I can actually spend more time on that model. So actually they're using it to paint that model better. Well, that's a good thing, right? And then if you get up to the level of Golden Demon Painter X, Neil Hollis, who's not about like pushing paint around a model, who's about getting those fine transitions through multiple layers of paint, then you don't use it if it's not suitable for the task. So there's no downside to it. So like, we had a person on the Facebook page say something about how it was paint for people who don't want to paint properly. I've seen, and I think they changed their mind a little bit, to be fair. But I have seen, there's been that reaction, and we've had it. Some people have said they've seen it when foundation paints came out. They said, well, that's cheating. Airbrushing is cheating. Dry brushing is cheating. Like painting should be difficult. Like, which is a concept I just don't understand whatsoever. The fact that these paints have come out doesn't mean I'm going to be challenging you for a Golden Demon. Like,
I think the idea of this is trying to lower that barrier to entry.
Absolutely.
It's trying to say, do you know what? If you want to play this game, don't worry if you don't feel as though you really want to paint it. Just do these 3 things. And you're done.
Yeah, I mean, that's one aspect of it. There are more aspects of it than that. There's also why bother spending 3 or 4 layers of paint to get this effect on your faces when you can just do this? Let's make that easier for you, for people who already enjoy painting. And then there's well, actually, you can do glazing, blah 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 with this. So you over there who like doing that, try this as well. But there's no there are people out there who no matter what comes out, if something came out, I don't know. Yeah, airbrushing was a prime example. When airbrushing became popular, people were like, well, I don't like airbrush models. It's cheating. It's too easy. It's like, well, what's easy about it? Like, yes, I can put a coat of red all over my model if I want with an airbrush. That's really easy. But to do some of the effects that some of the guys can do with an airbrush, that's not easy. That's skill. Yeah, they're using that tool. Like dry brushing. Anyone can dry brush a model. To dry brush a model well and to make it look really top level good still requires skill. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So, I agree with that. Yeah.
So there seems to be a little bit of gatekeeping around painting, like trying to make sure that the mystical arts of competition painting are not even competition. This is people who just think, in some cases, just people who think they're good. Trying to like stop too many people achieving. But the reality is, you see this with tournaments. People in Heresy at Adepticon were asking why the Age of Sigmar paint level has been high for a number of years, and it's because they've had minimum paint standards. And when you raise the bottom level, then you have an effect on every level above it to a point. So it's not a bad thing. We would all rather. I've got, from my point of view, if I was going to go this way with these paints, I've got a shed load of unpainted models in my house that might get paint on them. Cool. You've got other people who might go to events because they can paint models, and half the time, I'm sure these people won't actually fully work out which parts of model have been contrast painted and which have been painted at the end of the day, because it's not like some spectacular new thing. Oh my God, your models look so different because they've been contrast painted. Well, I think Pete Foley took an army of Gene Steeler Colts to Adepticon, and they were painted in no time at all. And probably because they were painted with these guys, and no one had a clue that had happened. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting. We've got 34 paints coming out. I think they're going to be popular. I've seen people playing around with them. I'm going to have to, from my point of view, I'll get some and I'll see how and when I want to use them, because again, they're just another tool to put in with the rest of the paints. The white one is the interesting one. They've got a white, but the more you put on, the more shade it creates in the recess. Like, how does that work? That's just,
that'll be interesting.
That's just magic, surely. But yeah, so contrast paints, I think they're going to go down well, and it'll be interesting to see if they can come up with other ways of using them. I mean, the real interesting thing is you don't get them wet, because that breaks up the bond of it, and the pigments go all skew, which is why, and it's one of the reasons why you can't have metallics, because the pigment's too strong, too large in there, doesn't flow right. But they've got this grey that might work. And then we saw, anyone there, like, as I say, I think it was Retributor Gold, and then one of the flesh washes over the top of it, making this slightly bronzy colour. And I was like, that is a brilliant paint. Like, that's all it takes to do that. It's no different from what I'm doing with my Custodes, with the flesh wash and whatever, but it works that little bit better. And I'm like, yeah, I'm in on that, because it actually stains the paint, as well as creating those recesses. So lots of cool stuff going on with contrast paint. It's a month out now, and it's going to be interesting, as I say, to see what they do with it.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. We'll keep an eye on that. In terms of Heresy, we had some models. Let's go through. So we got the Armiger upgrade kits. What do you think of those?
Yeah, I had a brief look at them online. They look pretty good. I mean, I must admit, I'm not overly sold with the that kit, but the upgrades are pretty cool. Pretty much what you'd expect, I suppose, from coming out of Forge World. Yeah,
and they've definitely got they've got that Mechanicum. They've got the Mechanicum weapon types, so they fit right into that, which is quite cool. I like the kits. I think they're really cool. So, and again, it's more choices. One thing, we'll talk about that in a second. So, yeah, we got those Armiger kits. There's like 4. One was available. It's all good to see. The new gunship for the Custodes. That's the one. That's the one. Did you get a look? It doesn't, from the front and stuff, it doesn't look too much dissimilar to the other one, to be honest. It's just this looks like a double-headed version, isn't it? Really, it's. I only saw it online. Do you know what? I didn't look at it very long, because once I sort of saw it, I just went, oh, another sort of generic vehicle. I mean, I really like it. I like that it's got open. It's open at the back, and the rules reflect that. So it's open at the back. If you get really lucky and you shoot it from behind, you've got a chance of blowing it up in one shot or something like that. Even as a super heavy, but it's got some big guns on it. Whether it's worth the points or not, I think it looks cool. So, like, it's one of those ones. A lot of super heavies are a bit like that. It's like, does it matter what they do if they look cool? That's
true.
We kind of claim that's why we play the game. The Contemptor Incandius. So the Blood Angels Contemptor. So we saw the mock-up, didn't we?
The render, wasn't it, was at Heresy Weekender, and now they actually had the model out.
What do you think of it?
But yeah, looks pretty much as you'd expect it, I suppose. Nothing.
I don't like the pose.
Nothing too different.
It feels like it's falling over, which affects the way I look at it. But it's cool. It's it's a Contemptor Dread at the end of the day. They all look, it's not that many of them look bad, is it? Because the Contemptor Dread chassis itself looks all right, and just as long as the bits on the front are all right, I think it looks fine. I thought it looked good. I'm sure there'll be a lot of them sold, being Blood Angels. Yes, absolutely, and having some cool rules as well doesn't hurt. and it's a contemptor.
Yeah.
So, Dreadnought sell. We know that. Otherwise, we wouldn't see so flipping many of them.
Exactly.
Golden Keshig and Ebon Keshig. So we got the jet bike dudes. I mean, again, it's the White Scars models on jet bikes. I think they look really cool, but it's not groundbreaking. The Ebon Keshig are a bit different though. Did you get to see the pictures of these online?
No, I don't think I did.
These are Terminators. They've got a bit of a I got to talk to Neil, the guy who designed them. Yes, he's mad as a box of frogs, isn't he?
He is. I did warn you.
He's. I think we had about 3 tangents before we got back to finishing his little story, but that's cool in a way. I quite enjoy that kind of aspect sometimes of some of these people. He's definitely being himself. But he was saying that he was talking to Jez Goodwin, I think, and he had was having ideas about not just taking the Mongolian aspect of the White Scars, but actually bringing in some Japanese influence into them as well. And they've got these long protection bits on their thighs, which actually overlap the wrong way, so that when they sit down, they kind of fold up. And apparently, that is a Mongolian. Sorry, apologies. So that is a Mongolian thing, that when the Mongols used to ride, they used to have these things which, overlap the wrong way, so they could actually store stuff in their armour. Cool. And have to take it out of there before they got down. But then there's other aspects of it that are a little bit more Japanese influenced as well. I really like the Ebon Keshig. I think they might have surprised a few people with them.
I think that Neil Roberts guy, a big man as a box of frog as he is, but he does seem to be a very talented sculptor and very passionate about what he's doing as well. So I think that sort of is going to be brilliant for the Heresy.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's got some stories. So always fun if you want to catch him.
I bumped into him in the lift.
Did you?
So I was going down with my son, and my son was playing on his iPad, and he just started talking to me about iPad games. He said, "Oh yeah, it's like the Games Workshop ones." I went, "Oh yeah, I know." I played the Horus Heresy one a fair bit. He went, "Oh, so do I." And he started talking at me for about a good 5 minutes about the Heresy games.
He's passionate.
But yeah, he's very passionate, and do you know what? I love everything he's sculpted so far. I've been a massive fan of. So that's a benefit, I think. If you get, because some of the sculptors I used to really like went off to the other teams, and I always thought it was a bit sort of, they now work on the Hobbit and stuff.
Sure.
Whereas new people in, very happy. I think he's really good sculptor.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to see what else comes forward. And it's almost a shame we don't know who sculpted what until we get to these little events, or every now and then you get someone talking about something online. But yeah, I mean, it is great to see. And then we had some Dark Angels shown off. Now, tell me you got to see these pictures.
I saw some of those online, yes. I thought they looked quite cool, but they didn't sort of. Maybe it's because it's Dark Angels.
Maybe
but they didn't sort of they didn't set me alight. I wasn't like, oh my god, they're amazing. But then again, it's probably because they're Dark Angels.
Yeah, and that's a completely understandable reaction. I must admit, I like the style they've got in. It's the kind of heraldry that they're going to be using. We kind of expected it. Like, we know they're not going to be robes everywhere, but it looks like there's going to be the odd robe. The Terminator Praetor dude, like his legs, armors look layered over each other like defenses. We got the sword symbol, dotted around everywhere. I don't know. I think there's something really nice. The the power armoured guy, say with his shield that looks like it might be a boarding shield, who knows, but the check pattern, I think they've got the style kind of, I didn't necessarily think about what to expect, but I think they've got it right.
Yeah. I mean, do you know any Dark Angel players that have looked at them and given you any sort of feedback?
No, not directly. I haven't really seen a lot, to be honest. But yeah. No, I haven't. I'm not on any specific groups or anything like that. So if that's it, I've just missed them. But I think they're cool. So that's all that matters, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna get some. There's going to be a lot of that old school weaponry with them as well. It'll be interesting what comes new from them. But yeah, exciting times for the Dark Angels players. And one thing, it shows you one thing that came out in the Q&A, and we've said it here, Forge World, the last 8 months or so, haven't released a huge amount of stuff. That's we're fully aware of that. When people thought they weren't doing anything, we always said, no, that's not going to happen, is it? We've always said that it's going to be, there's got to be stuff they're working on. They're basically getting all I think the term was flattened out. So their releases are getting more in line with specialist games, the way they release them. So, something every quarter, kind of a few things maybe, which is better than having 2 weeks of a full, Dark Angels release and then nothing for 3 months. It feels better that way. It might be more annoying to collect that way, but then you can always just wait until everything's out, can't you, if you want to put in an order. But it just shows you that they haven't stopped working, and they never did. They maybe haven't had the time and everything to work flat out or anything like that, but they've been going at it. We've got, in fact, I think the Demons of the Ruinstorm are an example of that. We got to see the pictures online for them. One of the reasons I bought all those Infernii were because I didn't believe that we were going to be getting demons anytime soon. And now we've got 3 brutes that have been shown off. We can expect them to be released within the next 3 months. I may have heard 2 months. There are supposedly other releases following on the heels of that. The winged brutes weren't. They're not sure if they're going to be made or not. I almost think we should all message Forge World and say we want them made, because I think they look amazing. So, if we get a range now of demons, actually, weirdly, the brutes were the one thing that I wasn't fully happy with getting from the Mercer line. I couldn't find the models that I really wanted anywhere, so I settled on some, and now I'm like, those new ones fit in fine, actually, with what I've got. Perfect. So I'll be putting an order in for some of them.
I thought when I looked at the Demons of Ruinstorm, that was one of the things I really sort of went, wow, they look the part. They look different to the normal GW demons. Yeah, they
absolutely do. Yeah.
And they don't look affiliated too heavily with any one god, and you just know that I think they really, really hit the nail on the head on those ones.
Yeah, even what I really like is the kind of proto-Chaos Star that's in their flesh. It's not the Chaos Star. It's slightly different. So, for those who don't know, the Demons of the Ruinstorm are shown in a way that the Imperium see them, without the knowledge of Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle and Slaanesh. So these generic demons, try to be generic. It'll be interesting to see. People are asking for their rules in Age of Sigmar and 40k. It'll be interesting to see if they ever do that, because of their nature of that. Because in Age of Sigmar and in 40k, they tend to stick to everything being god specific now.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but we shall see, I suppose. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what else comes from the Demons line. I think it's fantastic. I did go to the Q&A, which was interesting. We had Anuj and Luke and Will in there, representing rules, art, and models. And the Q&A was for all three. Unfortunately, like within 2 questions, Luke was pretty much out of the system because essentially models for the processes they're at the moment, models dictate artwork. So it's not like in Necromunda where it's the other way, well, not the other way round, but there's more of a split. So Luke didn't have a huge amount of questions to answer. Will can only talk about so much in terms of what he's doing. So a lot of the questions were more rules based, a lot of the usual stuff. But we did get a bit of chat about book 9, which is good. Which we haven't got a title yet. I don't think anyone's said a title, but we're looking at the Thramas Crusade, as we all thought. Dark Angels versus Night Lords, and some Dark Mechanicum thrown in there as well. The interesting thing within that is like how much is split up with the Dark Mechanicum as well. They're going to cover a little bit of the Schism of Mars with that. So the campaign's going to be all Thramas. Yes. But as with all these things, most of these books, there's the second kind of story they do as well, which will be a lot of the Dark Mechanicum, how it came about and everything like that. And the Dark Mechanicum are really interesting, actually. So you can have Loyalist and Traitor Dark Mechanicum because it's all about breaking the rules, basically. But various Magoses did that for different reasons. So the army is built around one Archmagos, and they're the one who are like, no, I'm going to break one of the 3 tenets of the Imperial Creed. So no AI, no playing with the warp, and no messing with the Emperor's design. And much like the Demon army list, it works like Tyranids in 40k. You pick your top thing, right? So in this case, you pick your Archmagos and which of those 3 evils he has decided to venture down, and that affects what opens up to you to use in that list. Don't know how much that influences everything at the moment, but so you can have it'd be great. One Dark Mechanicus army can be warp infused machines, maybe, and they could be a loyalist. You could be using the warp against the warp, or you can have a traitor guy who's playing around with AI, and that's cool as well.
Which could, the AI thing is a very easy thing to slot into both houses, isn't it? Really, absolutely.
Well, all of them are. The Mechanicum. We're talking about people here who think they know better than everyone else. So, and people who are often described as looking at the ends justify the means. So, any of those 3 things can be justified for good or bad. What is interesting is it's one HQ. It is your Archmagos. It is pretty much they split off to do this thing. You will have these command and control nodes that can be. That they control around the battlefield, which you can use for your Cortex control and for Cyberthurgy through. So you're not, although you're limited to one HQ, you can technically affect multiple parts of the battlefield, which kind of needs to happen, I suppose, if you're doing it that way. Or Cybermancy is something they talked about as well, rather than Psychers having Cybermancy. But I assume that's when you're playing with the warp. Could be wrong. We didn't get a huge amount kind of extra on that. But the Dark Mechanicum sounds really interesting. There's going to be a lot of weapon types as well that are opened up. And again, like your Loyalist Dark Mechanicum army might be able to take some of the most heinous weapons. They're not limited to Traitor or Loyalist only, or, most of them aren't. So that's pretty cool, in that you can really play around with that and not be restricted. I'm looking forward to see what they do with that, and I think a lot of people are as well. And it's going to be its own list. It's going to have its own models as well that then come off of that, which is really cool. Thramos, the Thramos campaign involves not only the Dark Angels and Night Lords, but does involve Knights, Titans, Solar Auxiliary, Imperial Army, all of that as well. So there might be little snippets of that, and we'll see them in the background, I would think, as well. It's also the background for the Dark Angels is going to have this focus on the early part of them, as we kind of expected, I suppose, like back, as the First Legion, having all that old tech, Dark Age tech, maybe pre-automata robots. We're going to be looking at Hexagrammicon, whatever it's called. Yeah, something like that. It's too late to worry about that. And the formation of the wings, and all that stuff. Everything's going to be there. They want to have each wing to have its own rights of war and characters. That's a
cool.
hope. That's a hope. That wasn't fully confirmed. They did say the Fire Wing does sneaky stuff. So I don't think we know a huge amount about the Fire Wing. So it would be nice to see those. We now know about the Dread Wing. We know the Raven Wing. We know the Iron Wing, and that kind of thing. And so it's going to be good to see that fully expanded. And I know Alan had done plenty of work on that before as well. It'll be good to see how Neil and Emma, she's still there. I think she's still there. Push on with that as well. But yeah, that's most of it. They were saying that the Dark Angels look, some of it which we've seen in the models, obviously, some of their heraldry and what they wear is, it's not only secretive in terms of they don't explain it to anyone, but it's reflective of the campaigns they've been on or specialities they've been on. So I get a feeling you're going to have a bit of that weird kind of Bretonian style thing you had in Warhammer, where you need a cohesive army, but you also want them to be independent.
Right.
In terms of all that. So getting that right as a painter, as a modeler, could be one of your trickier things to do, but also has loads of cool stuff you can do with it as well. So it's not going to be a hardship, I don't think, for the real passionate fans. They did say that because obviously in Book 8 at one point we were going to get some Space Wolf stuff and some Alexis Nebula stuff with the Alpha Legion. That's not going to be in this book. That is, Anuj has a desire to do that at some point. So what we're looking at as well from Book 9, we've got all the legions now. So it's going to be a case of reviewing, going back and finding those places where those legions fight again and pulling, as much into, say they did the Alexis Nebula, right, okay, so how can we expand the Space Wolves and bring them into one place to expand them? If they did Moloch, that would be, the brilliant time for the Sons of Horus to get all their shizzle back together, things like that. So we shall see on that one. And Agents of the Emperor and Agents of the War Master were going to be going into Book 9, but it looks like they've been pushed back as well because of not having enough space. There's only so much you can write about in these books and so much you can fit in. But fingers crossed, in a not too distant future, we can get assassins or whatever other weird, freaky ideas we're going to get from agents going forwards. And that's about it, really. There were a few of those questions. I think one question was asked 3 times, unfortunately, and it was one of those questions that was never going to be answered, which is always a problem with these open Q&As. But it felt like everything was kind of in place. I know there's been some chat online that we're going to see. Someone even said like the book might be out at the end of the year. I was told next year. It will be next year. In fact, Anuj told me a hope of a date. Or no, not a date, but a hope of a time. And I said, don't hope. Don't tell me hopes, because that's how we got. Essentially, hope was how we got to the book not coming out of the Weekender and people being annoyed.
Yes, that's true.
The Book 9's not finished yet. It will be finished, at some point in terms of draft A, but then it needs to go and be checked, and then it needs to go and be put into planned out, and that's before it all gets sent off for printing. Are they even going to print in China at the moment? It looks like the reason why the Sylvaneth book's late is because of issues with England, China. Not just them, other board game companies have had issues with China recently, so who knows? Stuff's being delayed. I would think we'll get it before by end of first half next year for sure. Well, that would be my hope. I asked kind of Anuj, I said, right, you're not writing 40k rules anymore. What does that mean in terms of like productivity on focus on the heresy? And there was a broad kind of answer of if they just concentrate on black books, they could probably do one a year. But that doesn't mean that means no red books or other bits as well.
True. Yeah.
So I think most people would agree that actually if it took a year and a half or a year and a bit or whatever, and there was a black book and a red book of some kind, then that would be better. And I'm fine with that. But we've never really had most of the time it's been a year and a half, hasn't it? A year and a bit to a year and a half has been not uncommon.
Easily, yeah.
So I think there's only maybe one that came out in that year-ish period. But for some reason we seem to think we should get one every year or as a community, which is strange because it's never really happened. So, yeah, fingers.
Wasn't there 1 year where we got one within 6 months of one coming out or something?
Essentially, yeah.
I remember thinking it's far too quick.
Yeah, I think there was 1 year where that happened, but most of the time it's been a year and 3 months or a year and a half, something along those lines. But yeah, and it's what can you do? We want the quality to be there. Some of these black books have been of that quality. Some have slightly missed, but I'd rather they take that time and get those books out. So, I'm sure we're going to get the same old stuff. Come around to the weekend, or people will be going, "Oh, there's going to be a black book there." I wouldn't put my money on it. Let's put it that way. But hopefully before the end of halfway through the year, and we'll be sitting on book 9, and then we've got a whole interesting matter then of what comes from book 10 onwards. But it seems definitely. Book 9 itself seems pretty cool. From what we know of it, we still got plenty of book 8 stuff to come out. And I'm sure they'll show off plenty of stuff. There was a load of Adeptus Titanicus stuff being shown off. We've got all that as well. If you are really into the story, Adeptus Titanicus doesn't look like it's slowing down. They showed off scenery kits, the Night Porphyron, which looks awesome on its little base. Different coloured dice, which is just finally, because whenever you're trying to find that one die you need in there, soon I'm going to buy those dice as soon as they come out. Take the reactor dice from each of the coloured sets and swap them, so that when they're in a pile you can find them. Probably take the weapon, the hit location dice as well, because that's another one that you can't find. But Forge World seemed like I think we could be on for a steady, constant, not rapid, not weekly, but a steady stream of stuff coming out from them, and I'm looking forward to it. Right, just before we move on, there were a couple of other things. Did you see the Aeronautica Imperialis trailer?
No, I haven't seen the trailer. I saw a thing saying that it was coming back out, and that's all I saw.
I mean, it wasn't much. It was one of those teaser videos. Really interesting choice. So we know that basically Battlefleet Gothic to be made would need a whole rule. It would need a rules writer, a modeler, and a designer and everything else. Like you need a crew to work on it, and it would take you a year and a bit. That's what Forge World mean by they would have to stop everything else because they don't have that staff. They don't have the space to employ that staff at the moment. That in the future, who knows? But it's not on the cards at the moment. Aeronautica is interesting. So Aeronautica Imperialis came out, I don't know how many years ago. Epic scale planes, 6-foot table, long flights, and you could only turn a little bit with a Marauder bomber and all that. It was quite a cool game. I wasn't very good at it, but it was quite a cool game. It never really took off, pun intended. It'll be really interesting. So a lot of people I've seen saying, oh yeah, we want it back, blah, 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 blah. I wonder if they change the game style with X-Wing out there and games like that. I wonder if we get much more of a dogfighting game.
Yes. Yeah, it could be, couldn't it?
It wouldn't.
Think how popular things like X-Wing have been.
It would make sense, I think. It would be a quicker, faster game, simplify those rules, because there was some silly stuff you could do in Aeronautica, and it also reduces then how much you need to start with. Like you only need a couple of planes then for each race. I assume they're going to set it in 40k. But yeah, if you had 2 or 3 style of fighters for each race, that's a year's worth of releases right there, without going too far. Maybe they won't. Maybe they'll do something else. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's more towards the X-Wing style game, and I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah, I suppose actually thinking about it, that's a gap that they've got in there.
Yeah.
In their, because how they get in all these sort of games, the card-based games and the smaller skirmish games, they're sort of filling out their product line, aren't they, with a bit of something for everyone.
Yeah.
They haven't got that yet, have they?
No.
So that would make sense.
It fits kind of like with the way we look at the way they've modernised Necromunda, and streamlined some of the rules and pushed it into what it is now. Interesting. Because also as well, Blood Bowl, the Blood Bowl 3 computer game has been announced. That's going to have the new 2020 rules in it. So it looks like they're going to be reviewing Blood Bowl, which will be interesting to see if they change that much or they just tighten it up. I don't know. Specialists have got plenty going on, keeping those boys busy. And then the final thing I think we talk about here, because of you mainly, is there's a reason to go to Adepticon next year.
There is indeed, yes.
So there were rumours while we were there. We may have already mentioned this. I think we may have, yeah. So while we were there, there were talks about Crystal Brush leaving Adepticon. I think you've talked before about the possibility that they were looking to come over to Europe.
Yep.
There's certainly a wealth of Italian, Spanish and German and English painters, certainly Spanish, Italian, German painters entering Crystal Brush and doing well. So, if that is a market of theirs, you can understand them coming over here. Obviously, them leaving, I think it's that way. Them leaving has then allowed a gap which GW have now taken with Golden Demon. There are people saying, looks like GW have pushed Crystal Brush out of the way. Well, I'm not too sure, Well, Adepticon make the decision at the end of the day, like if they want GW there or not. So, whatever. Creature Caster are still going to be doing their painting competition there. It's certainly hit
and
mixed
I think
reviews.
It'd be quite cool that the one thing you have got is obviously Golden Demon is a GW only competition.
Yeah.
So you're not going to go there with your mad busts and all this sort of weird and wonderful stuff that's non-GW. But the great thing about Adepticon with, like, say, Creature Caster is there's nothing stopping some other manufacturers or something saying, right, well, there'll be Golden Demon, there'll be Creature Caster, and there'll be another painting competition. They can easily squeeze these things into Adepticon because it is so big.
Yes. I suppose the one worry is that Golden Demon kind of dominates. But I think there's people out there who are dead set against GW and Golden Demon for whatever reason, rightly or wrongly, who will probably always enter the alternative. It's restrictive in what you can bring, but also in some ways, some people view that as not a bad thing, in that you can't have your sculpt professionally made for you, which may or may not give you X amount of advantage before you paint it. There's a definite kind of
there's no public vote.
There's a definite pushback from certain parts of the community, and there are valid reasons sometimes for it. The fact that some people are like, it's restricted to Games Workshop models as well. Is that there's a lot of Games Workshop models to choose from, and when you look at Forge World combined in with that, there's a lot of styles of models now. It's not like you're stuck to Games Workshop's, cheesy action poses and all that. You can go and find a model that suits your style. So,
and you know what, Golden Demon's quite a big name, I think, in the painting community.
Well, we know that certain people in America, like some of the American competitions in the past, may not have been as well run, but also that's time as well. A while ago now since they had a Golden Demon in the US, but I think for a lot of so your top level painters, some of them will enter, some of them won't. They have their own kind of viewpoints on that and whatever. What I have seen is a lot of painters who are very good, who said, actually, I've been waiting for this for an age. Like, Golden Demon's back in the US. I'm going to enter. I know I'm not going to do that well, but I'm going to enter. Which is totally a cool thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I saw a lot of positivity about it coming back. I thought that was really cool. I think it's a great move because with them taking out the mini demons, I think it's a good move to try and do more in other countries, because then you don't focus all the attention on one day a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
You allow people in those other countries to compete locally almost. So people in America can obviously go to the US one. There'll be the Europe one. There might even be another. They might even split the Europe one into multiple. You might have it might even go back to the days where you have a Germany one and you have an Italian one or something like that, and it allows people to sort of compete at a slightly less intense level. And I think it's good for Games Workshop in general, because I think there's a lot of painters in America that would happily enter Golden Demon but don't want to fly all the way over to the UK to enter.
Yeah, you can't blame them.
I think it's going to have a big draw. I do think it will have a massive draw.
And you absolutely can't blame Adepticon for taking on Golden Demon. If it's a case of Crystal Brush decided, no thanks, we're not involved anymore, and then GW were like, well, we'll take a space. Like, why wouldn't you jump at that opportunity?
Definitely.
There were again, I saw some interesting comments about GW trying to take over Adepticon. Well, it started off as a GW event, and if you took away 40k, Heresy, and Age of Sigmar, just those three, let alone the other games, like Adepticon would be a quarter of its size. Was it 400 odd players in the team championships? Age of Sigmar is doing a team championships this year as well. And they had 200 players in the doubles. And I don't know how many people were playing Heresy and Titanicus. So, its heart and soul has been with GW. And even any kind of event, any miniature gaming event, that's open up to all of them. It's not necessarily that you have to give GW extra space, but the chances are they're going to come and take it because they're the biggest games company by a margin in terms of fantasy games. They really are now. So yeah, you can't blame them at all. So yes, Golden Demon, and I know people are planning their entrance already over in America. So crack on. And you never know, it's another reason for some people maybe to come from the UK to visit Adepticon.
Yeah, and Andy, I, and Rich already talked about going back over there. So
yeah, And the good thing is,
it would get. I mean, for me, I've done the crystal brush thing now, so
Yeah.
I would be quite happy going over there for a golden demon. If crystal brush pulled out and then it was another, say it was a different company, so that would really, for me, then I think, well, do I want to go or do I not want to go? So for me, I was like, yeah, I'd happily go over for it. So.
Yeah, and you would expect that. So the good thing is you would expect that a golden demon will be run in a certain way. And whatever you think of Crystal Brush, and I've had some reception from various people, and good to talk to people about it. Again, we never disparage the quality of the people who won the event, but when it's run in a way that doesn't seem to fit that well with a painting competition, the fact that that GW, for whatever flaws it's got, it's going to have like a kind of structure that seems right, is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, they know. I mean, they've got the. You may have seen they did a lot of talking about how they judge a golden demon, how the process works. Now they were doing lots of explaining about the different, stickers, etc. I can well imagine that there's going to be 2 to 3 studio people flown out. To maybe do like a few seminars here and there, and then they'll be judging the golden demon on the final day. Probably they'll be taking probably entries in from the Saturday, I can imagine, a bit like they do the fest, and then the Sunday they'll be doing a judging panel. They know how they want to run a golden demon now. Max and Aidan have really refined the whole process. And they know, so it's not going to be the case of, well, what do we do now? They know they're going to run it. I can bet you that when they put up the timetable, it will be almost a carbon copy of a Warhammer Fest. Models must be entered by 12 o'clock. First cut judging will be done at 1 o'clock. 3 o'clock, finally, everything will be confirmed. 3:30 will be an award ceremony. It'll be almost, just churned out exactly the same way because they know it works. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if you want to check up about like how they run Golden Demon and tips on winning it, as they were on Warhammer TV, weren't they?
Yes.
Last week. So you can go and look there. But alongside that, they've also announced Everchosen. Have you had?
Yes.
Do you know anything about this?
I not really. I sort of read it was a global painting competition.
Yeah, so as far as I can tell, there's 2 ways of doing this. There's either running it through your stores and then having people progress from there, much like some of the old GDs, Golden Demons used to do, or it's doing it online somehow. So I can't really imagine another way of doing it. So each of those ways is flawed in its own system. But again, if it's one of those things that gets people kind of excited about entering, and gives people an opportunity, there's like the biggest problem with doing it stores based is whether you live anywhere near a store. In the UK, chances are you're only going to be an hour away from a store. If you're in the US, that could be 4 hours, or longer. But you can't have everything. It's also really unlucky if your store is, David Soper lives around the corner.
Exactly. That's his local store, and he decided he wants to enter.
But then also, you could then choose to go to a different store if there's another one around the corner. So you could be strategic with that as well. It'll be interesting. We'll keep an eye on that one.
It'll be interesting to see how they run it, how it pans out. I personally think it will be a store based.
Yeah, it makes most sense.
Competition. It makes more sense to me to them to run it that way. And get people in the stores.
Yeah, exactly. What that does is that gets people to visit the store, but it also encourages encourages people to enter, a chance to win something in a store, like the chance to have levels of achievement. We've talked about this. Like our gaming club talked about having an interclub and within the club painting competition, and I'm like, well, there's no point me entering if Dan enters, because he's a much better painter than me. And it like nothing I can produce will beat what he can produce. So it's not like even, well, I might have a chance this time. It just won't happen. So what's the point in entering, kind of thing? I don't enjoy it enough to enter, but and that Golden Demon can be like that for a lot of people. Some people like that challenge. Some people are like, well, there's no point. Like, I paint well, but I don't paint well enough to win, so I won't bother. But if you have levels, divisions, as it were, pushing upwards, then people might think, well, this is about my level. I could win this. So it can encourage that.
Definitely.
Which again, it's not a bad thing. Putting, and I'm sure again, when it, if and when it comes out, it's going to have its issues. Say there are plenty of issues with having a worldwide painting competition that's run by stores, but you don't have to enter it for starters. And if you can't enter it, but you did want to, well, life happens. But it's another opportunity, which is a good thing. But we have warbled on a lot. I think we shall leave that there. I think we've covered roughly like everything that's relevant. There are other people who were at the fest who will be doing their catch-ups, I'm sure. Darren was taking plenty of notes next to me in the Q&A. And I'm sure I've missed little bits out. But, as I say, we've talked for an hour or so already. So we don't want to go too much further on. We'll take a break. We'll come back and we'll have an interview with Mr. Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Well, joining me now, we have one Mr. Aaron Dembski-Bowden. How are you doing, sir?
I am doing good.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. And this is, I think you're basically the last interview in this little series we've been doing. And we should probably go right back to the start, because last time we had you on was with John. So you didn't get the full light to yourself, which is, I know, the way you like it. But tough,
how dare you?
But tough, frankly. So we know you've been writing. Cadian Blood was your first novel, wasn't it, for GW, for Black Library?
Just to interject, I actually tried to get John for this one as well.
Did you? That's fine. But he just refused you, or wasn't busy.
I think he just knew I was being a coward and couldn't be bothered.
Well, it would have been interesting if it had been both of you come on. We could have worked with it. We can do that one again sometime. Don't worry about that. You can come back. So yeah. Let's go back. So Aaron writing for Black Library. That was Cadian Blood was your first novel, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it was. I think that was like 10 years ago.
2009. Yeah. I did a small bit of research.
By the gods.
Yeah, I did. It wasn't too much. Like, you got a Wikipedia page, lexicon page. Sorry, it's really easy. I actually read that when it came out as well. It's a good fun book. But you've done other stuff around 40k, haven't you? Before that, or was that at a similar time?
No, that was. I think the first thing I ever did was a Crimson Fist short story.
Oh, right.
Called One Hate. And then that was followed up almost immediately by Cadian Blood. So they kind of came out around the same time, I think.
Cool. And that was back in the days where all new authors got to write Imperial Guard.
Yeah, it was like the hand-holdy, do this and we'll see if you pull it off kind of book.
Sure. How was that? I suppose this is before this. What were you doing? Were you writing other stuff?
Before this, I was a full-time RPG writer, and I did some freelance stuff for video games.
Excellent. So you were...
So it was like one of those feast or famine things. Sometimes the money was really, really good, and then sometimes it would just be like dry, because RPG work pays an absolute pittance,
right.
And video game work pays just gold, actual gold.
Hence why we've had a few people from the Black Library stable move to the other side of America.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you can't blame them. So it's fair to say you were used to working within someone else's IP and all the demands and rigours that produces.
Yes, I never actually thought about it like that. But yeah, I was kind of trained from uni to do it. So yeah, that's a good point, actually.
So when they said, right, it's an Imperial Guard novel, you were down with that, just like
I was delighted because it sounds weird, but there's nothing in 40K that I don't like, and there's nothing that I don't know fairly extensively because I've been into it since I was like 8. So they could have like thrown anything at me. Although weirdly, I thought they were going to throw a Warhammer fantasy novel at me. Oh. I had all these ideas about what my fantasy novel would be, and they're like, "Oh, could you do an Imperial Guard novel?" I was like, "Oh, hell yeah, okay."
Awesome. So from the age of 8, you've been into this stuff and devouring it all. And
do you remember Space Crusade?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The best bit about Space Crusade was like the rule book and the mission book because it had that cartoon in it about what the Space Marines were like when they were doing a boarding action.
All right. Yeah.
Fighting all the different aliens, and I just remember the art of that, and it just blew me away. And like that was what hooked me into the game more than the game itself. Like So yes, I think I was like 8 or 9 or something. Actually, to be honest, I might have been 10. I'm very bad at remembering my actual age at points. But yeah, it was. It started then and never stopped really.
And you couldn't draw, so you had to write. Is that how it works?
I'm in the running for one of the worst artists of all time.
No, we've seen anyone who follows you on Twitter has seen your beautiful book covers.
Yeah,
it's it's if you sell it the right way, it would still go for millions. It's all about how you sell the art. That's all it is. So that's quite interesting. So you were kind of we've talked to obviously. I suppose the other thing is being an RPG writer. I'm guessing that you had to work alongside other writers at the same time as well.
Oh yeah, constantly. Like most, for example, with White Wolf, doing Vampire and Werewolf and Hunter. Those books tended to be between 4 to 5 writers, and everyone would get one chapter, and you would have to be constantly sending in emails to make sure X hadn't mentioned Y and A was dealing with B and so on.
Yeah, they're cool, and I really liked White Wolf's storytelling within its books. Actually, thought it was awesome. Possibly the best part of their books.
I agree. As
you grow up, you realise that there are other ways to play games. But moving on, so because we talked to a few people now who've been in that. We haven't really asked anyone the other way. So what was it like going back and just being, this is your novel with Cadian blood then? Was that something you were used to at all? Had you practiced that kind of stuff?
Yeah, in a way, because I've always written prose. I used to write it constantly, from my early teens. But I just had this idea in my head that I would. I knew enough about the publishing industry to know that 0.01% of novelists are full-time novelists.
Yeah.
And almost all of them have part-time jobs or they kind of scrape by. So my goal was always I will just write in loads of different ways until I'm about 50. And then once I've saved enough money, I will take a big risk on the whole novel thing.
Sure.
So when they kind of dropped the idea of doing a novel that early, I was like, oh, okay. Yes. Immediately, yes. And
I was really surprised when I went back and looked at dates that First Heretic was 2010. It was a very short time period between Cadian Blood and First Heretic coming out, which I think is a testament to your skill. But bearing in mind what was going on, so the Horus Heresy had as a fan of this environment, were you full in as soon as they released those first novels, Dan and Graham?
I was pretty early.
Cool.
I got Horus Rising when it was still the only one in the series out, but I didn't buy it myself. Actually, I was extremely ill with an ear infection that kept me off my feet for about like 4 or 5 days, and I was complaining about it on to the freelancer group that I was working with on this White Wolf book at the time, and it was one of them who sent me Horus Rising as like a present to cheer me up.
All right.
And I just burned through it in one day, and I couldn't believe it. It was so good. I couldn't believe how good that book was.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly common story in terms of going through it quickly and being that kind of receptive to it, I suppose. Were you a fan of Dan's before that?
I was. Eisenhorn, like who wasn't a fan of
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I had to ask the question. I couldn't just assume. So you've gone from going to Black Library, getting your first novel, to being pitched or being offered a Heresy book. How did that happen? Or were you begging for it?
Quite quickly. And I have to be careful about the story because it sounds quite braggy. If
sure.
That happened literally after Cadian Blood came in. I was like actually halfway through that. Black Library went through a big shift where management changed around, and I got shunted to a different editor. And I was really terrified because my first editor, Lindsay, really, really liked me. And I was like, oh, God, I don't know who the hell this new one is.
Sure.
And that was Nick. And so Nick sent back Cadian Blood, and he was quite lukewarm on it. He's like, yeah, this is good. And I was like, okay, fine. Lindsay really liked it, but okay, whatever. And then it came time to commissioning the next one. And they just said, okay, pitch whatever. And I just done that Crimson Fist short story, so I pitched like this really long Crimson Fists document, and I was really proud of it. And it was going to be about the fall of their fortress monastery. And then Lindsay emailed back when that was about 90% done and said, no, don't do that, don't pitch that. We're going to do that in a different book. I thought, okay, what should I do? And then she said, oh, do Night Lords. They were quite popular. And that is literally why I pitched the Night Lords trilogy. She said, oh, yeah, no, do that. We'd be receptive to that. I was like, okay. And anyway, long story short, in the when I got the first edit comments back from that, the first draft of Soul Hunter, in the margin, like fairly early on, Nick had written ADB is destined for the Horus Heresy.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that like they hadn't like mentioned anything about it. It had that in the comments, and I was like, oh my God. And then I Skyped with them like later that week, and that was when Nick said, okay, no, we'd like to bring you on the Horus Heresy team if you're interested. And I've been writing with them for like no time at all. I hadn't met any of the other authors, and I was like, yes, oh my God, absolutely. And they said, okay, well, we want you to do a Space Marine Battles novel first, and then you'll do your first Heresy novel. And I was like, okay, what's Space Marine Battles? And they said, it's going to be a new series, and we'd like you to be one of the people who kicks it off. And they said, just write out whatever chapter you feel like writing about. And I just sent this huge list of chapters that I loved. I said, what are these? And they said, oh, yes, Black Templars. Definitely do a Black Templars one. I was like, okay, that's fine. That's easy. And it was this surreal experience of like being given your dream, but then being kind of impatient because the next level of your dream was like right after it.
Yeah, I can't really imagine that. That's pretty awesome. So it must have been. I'm trying to picture you reading that in the margin of the on the side of the thing. That's a kind of sit down moment, I suppose.
Yeah, it was. It was one of those ones where you go through it like 3 or 4 times and you think, is he being sarcastic?
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So we know that we have the High Lords of Terror meetings. What your first one was that fairly soon after all that was going on?
Yes, my first one was I'm not even sure Hell's Reach was out when I went to my first High Lords meeting, and it was Dan, Jim, Graham, and the editors.
Wow, so quite a small one.
Yeah, it was like that because that was when the team had it was never a big team to begin with, and it had shrunk down to the core then. Like that was the remaining core.
Yeah,
and I think Legion had just come out. Like that's how. No, I tell a lie. Battle for the Abyss had just come out. That's where we were.
Sure. Okay, and how were you in that meeting? Because that must be, as you said, this has all happened quite quickly, and then you're in that meeting with, even then Graham and Dan and Jim, big names.
I was incredibly nervous. I'm always quiet in heresy meetings anyway. I'm not excellent at having ideas on my feet. I'm a 4 a.m. can't sleep, walking around the house kind of ideas person.
Right.
So I don't really shine in meetings necessarily. I don't have ideas off the cuff very often. So I tend to go there and listen and occasionally interject with actually in the old law, I'm that guy. But I was extra special terrified. That was also the first time I met Dan Abnett. And sure. I know I told the story a million times, but it always makes him laugh when he inevitably reminds me of it. That I was so nervous I didn't control the volume of my voice. So I walked up to him across the room, holding my hand out to shake. And he's like, "Oh, hi, you're Aaron." And I went, "Hi, Dan Abnett!" Really stupidly loud. I still remember seeing him flinch. So that wasn't a great first impression.
Well, if anyone's going to be capable of dealing with that kind of thing, it's Dan, I suppose.
He's unshakable.
Yeah, I can imagine he's seen it all in terms of people approaching him. And it's good to know. It's good to know that, the authors that people look up to are human. Always good to remember these things as well. And I'm sure there are plenty of people listening who would have or have done the same thing, except for my good friend Dave Witek, who I record After Eleanor with, who Bill King and Dan were at Adepticon, and he walked up to Bill King to get all his Gotrek and Felix stuff signed and ignored Dan, and only realised when someone told him that was Dan Abnett that he one of his comics, I can't remember what it's called now, Resurrection Man, is it? Dave was a massive fan and didn't realise and had blanked Dan Abnett. These things happen. I'm sure they get over it. So that first meeting, obviously if you're quiet and you're not there, it sounds harsh. You're not verbally contributing as much as others in the room. That's understandable. How was it leaving that room?
That wasn't good in a sense. I was actually kind of caught between being more enthusiastic than ever and being a bit demoralized.
Right.
Because especially early on in the heresy, but it was something that happened constantly. It's if you wrote a chapter or you wrote something related to it in 40k, you kind of had dibs on it in the heresy. And Dan, Graham, and Jim, between them, had written almost everything in 40k, even back then. So there was a lot of stuff where Nick told me to come to the meeting with ideas, but even without talking, I could tell as the meeting went on, I was like, "That's already reserved. That's already reserved. That's already reserved." And it sounds like at the time I was panicking because I was like, "Oh God, what the hell do I do?" Which again is why I ended up writing about the word bearers, because they were practically the only ones that hadn't been licked and touched, so to speak. I don't mean that in a bad way, because for the same reason they Black Library said, "Okay, we'll reserve the Night Lords for you if you want to write about them." And I was already I'd just done a Night Lords novel, and I knew there was 2 more in the trilogy. It's you don't have to. Anyone can do the Night Lords. It's all good. So it's difficult to explain because I like being honest, and it was kind of intimidating and a bit disheartening in some ways. But I also don't like making my friends feel bad because they weren't intentionally if I'd been brave enough to say to them, hey, do you think I could maybe, they probably would have said, oh yeah, no, sure. But I was just, I was a coward.
Well, I think every one of us has been in a situation similar to that where you come out of it thinking, I wish I could have spoken up. And I've been left watching someone do what I want to do. But I think it worked out in the end.
I think so too.
So whose kind of idea was it for the word bearers then? Was that a case of it was you were thinking who was left, or was someone like, well, we need this word bearer story?
It was who's left.
Sure.
And it was specifically who's left where I can write a novel that feels like Horus Rising felt.
Right.
And the best bet, it was either White Scars or Word Bearers, really. Even like I could have done a World Eaters one, for example, but they'd already featured loads in the first three, and I thought, well, they've had a lot of airtime. I want to do something untouched, and most of the untouched stuff at the time, it was Thousand Suns hadn't had anything, Space Wolves hadn't had anything, Ultramarines hadn't had anything, Blood Angels hadn't had anything, and I went in wanting to do one of those four. But they were the ones that were they were hardcore reserved, and not because the guys were being tools, but it was like, well, no, we're going to be writing these books soon.
Yeah. Fear
to Tread ended up getting delayed. Well, not delayed. It just ended up not happening for a while. But yeah, they were essentially the next books in the next 2 years, so that's why they were kind of cut off.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was just the Word Bearers because they were there, and I thought, yeah, you know what, I can make this feel like Horus Rising, which is what I wanted my first, and at the time I thought possibly only heresy novel to feel like to the readers.
That's cool. How obviously you said you've been hardcore into 40k for a long time. How aware were you of the Word Bearers story in that respect before?
Everything that's been published, I knew.
Right.
But obviously that comes with a couple of contradictions and interpretations that I ran by various people. I had a crisis of faith. I mean, I have a crisis of faith every single novel.
Yes.
And what happened is somewhere between 20 and 90,000 words, I will melt down and send it to various people and say, oh my God, help me. This is terrible. And on First Heretic, it was about 30,000 words in, and I sent it to Dan, who I still didn't really know that well at the time. And I was like, oh God, Dan, help. And I kind of just thought he might email me back. But he called me and kind of talked me down off the ledge, so to speak. The exact words he used actually were, don't blow up on the launch pad.
That must have been quite interesting to receive, not knowing you that well. Because now I suppose people are just like, oh, Aaron, it's Aaron. Back then, not so much.
Yeah, it was incredibly humbling, I would say.
Sure. I've got my you might hear in the background my cat Magnus has decided to try and join in.
Hello, Magnus.
We'll leave him for now till he gets too noisy. So you said there that you knew everything kind of that was written. Does your brain just hold that information? Are you one of those people who are like, yeah, I've read it, it's lodged in there?
Yes, but not with important stuff.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
With 40k, yes. Yeah. I couldn't tell you when I have to pay my car insurance, and I forget passwords every day, and
sure.
But yeah, I mean, you want me to remember what I read in third edition when I was 12? Oh yes, absolutely.
I think there's a few people who might feel that they've got something similar. And I know my wife gets frustrated when I forget everything. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, but I can remember Solitaire's stat line from, whatever. But
exactly. Important stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you wish you could push it out. But there we go. So that obviously, because when I've talked to you and John particularly, there's different type of writers now. Always have been, I suppose. some Gav is one who admits that he's not always fully up. Like, he can't go back and look at every single thing that's written and remember it all. Do you think that knowledge that's stuck in there is something that? How do we say this? Sorry, this is a long-winded question. It feels like you've got a real grip on 40k of what 40k is, and some people do that in the looser sense, and you seem to have a real kind of understanding of what makes 40k work and the parts within 40k and how they work as well. Do you think that's part of that retention of knowledge?
That's a really good question. I'm going to say no.
Sure.
I don't think knowledge is never bad. Like, context is never bad. But for example, like, take Dan. If you put me and Dan in a 40k quiz of 500 questions, I would literally crucify him.
Yeah.
Like, I would leave him in the dust. But that doesn't mean anything, because Dan radiates 40k. Like, his merest breath, reeks of 40k. Like, that man can nail the mood. He doesn't know what the armor of Shrieking Souls is off the top of his head, but it doesn't matter. It categorically doesn't matter. So, I mean, it's cool to have a brain for trivia, but I don't think it's even an advantage, to be honest. I do think context is always good.
Yeah.
But 40k is like a mood more than the facts. In fact, it's often the people online, like, listing out screeds of facts who I disagree the most with, because I'm like, you're not seeing the wood for the trees. Yeah,
actually, in listening to you answer that, it's the mixture of the two, because so I've started rereading Gaunt's Ghosts, and it's been a long time since I've read them, and I've messaged Michael from Tracker Words a couple of times. I'm like, oh my word, like, this happens. Like, I think at one point Gaunt loads a clip of 40 bolt shells into his bolt pistol, or something like that, and it's like, Dan never lets the facts get in the way of a brilliant story. And again, it's a different time as well, so
that's true.
It's a minor thing, and it's only one of those things that geeks like us get really. But
also, in Dan's defense, there's nothing that wouldn't say a human-sized bolt gun sidearm wouldn't be able to be, like, resized for that.
True, potentially.
Dan's also very good at suggesting what the Imperium would have, not necessarily what we've seen before in the past.
Yeah, absolutely true. But there are some looser things. It's that the finite detail isn't the story.
Yeah,
at the end of the day. Yeah. So because I wouldn't. God forbid, I'm not going to have a go at Dan's writing. I love everything I've written of his. Pretty much.
I would do harm to you if you did.
You could try. But yeah, so there's that mix of context, because I really do feel when I talk to you when we recorded the last time, you and John do have that real deep understanding mixed with that knowledge of what's going on, to be able to sit here and me to throw a question at you and to be able to answer it in a 40k way, in a 40k atmosphere, but also being able to back that up with 40k knowledge.
I get you.
Which is and obviously that's it's come from filling your head with useless information for many years, which I completely understand. Now, First Heretic came out and went down really, really well. Right from the start, did you have that grand scope of the story of what they were, what that arc was going to be?
I had absolutely no idea. I never do.
That's also...
Every time I've tried to plan a book, I've got halfway through and literally scrapped it and started over.
Sure. Does that make it hard to pitch?
No.
Okay.
I'm extremely lucky, and I have very patient editors.
Sure.
Where it's at a point, and it's been at a point for a very long time, where they'll say, what do you want to do a book about? Like, what faction? And I'll say, oh, X. And they'll say, how late's it going to be?
Yeah.
And I'll say, super, really, ultra late. I'm sorry. And they'll be like, okay, we'll publish it when it gets here.
Cool. Everything except for the love story, the Eldar love story.
you joke, actually, but I got an email about a year ago where they said, so if you're serious about that, I was like, well, I am.
We're going to have the whole range of Warhammer romance sitting next to Warhammer horror. It's going to be great.
I would read the heck out of that. I'm not even kidding.
I'm a bit worried how many people would, to be honest, but they certainly would. I'll move on from First Heretic. It's been out there a long time. Aurelian. Now, was that another one where they came to you and said, how about the limited editions? Because that was the second one. It was Promethean Sun first, then Aurelian. Is that a different kettle of fish when that's put on the table?
That was quite a thing. Promethean Sun obviously hadn't been out and been released when they came to me about Aurelian. And they said, we'd like you to do a limited edition novella. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea, because I get really frustrated when I sweat blood for 6 months and only 1,000 people read it.
Right.
And they're like, no, it'll be released eventually, in 2 years after the limited run. And I thought, okay, that's cool. And at that time, I was still so early that I was still super saying yes to everything.
Sure.
It was never specific projects. They never said, can you do a story about X? But I mean, when they came to me and said, do you want to do a novella? I was like, of course I do.
Yeah.
It's 40K. It's words about 40K. Yes, I do want to do that. So I agreed. And they said, okay, what will it be about? And I said, okay, it's going to be called, God, what was it? It was going to be about the creation of the first Khorne Lord of Skulls.
Right. Okay.
Cybernetica. That's what it was going to be. It's going to be called Cybernetica, and it's going to be about how the traitors make the first Lord of Skulls, and etc. etc. And they said, that's great. And then about halfway through it, I was like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. And so I messaged the short fiction editor at the time, Christian. I said, I don't want to do this. I've got a better idea. And I didn't have a better idea. But he said, okay, what's the idea? And I was like, what Lorgar saw in the Eye of Terror. He's like, all right, that's an excellent idea. Do that instead. I was like, I have no idea what Lorgar saw in the Eye of Terror. So I talked to some pals, and I made a squillion notes, and I went on a lot of long walks. And we kind of worked out what Lorgar saw in the Eye of Terror. And that's how Aurelian happened.
That's pretty awesome. Do you work better when you've got that, rubbish, I have to follow through with what I've now just said?
Yes.
That's good. That's good then.
Because I need two things to write. A deadline that forces me to write, and guilt that also forces me to write.
It's much like painting models, really.
Yes, actually, yeah. I've done a painting challenge for Warhammer Community, and it's the most I've ever painted in my life, just because I have to do it. In fact, this interview is happening because you came up to me at the last Weekender.
Indeed.
And I could just see in your eyes, wow, I'm the bad guy right now. This poor guy, poor Greg, he's just, all he does, he wants to talk to me for 10 minutes. Oh no, I'm the bad guy.
It's all good. We know what you're like by now. It's fine. So Aurelian, the story came out, but what was interesting was, I was hardcore into the heresy from the start, and I was sat on my computer at 7 o'clock, I think it was, because I was supposed to start work at 7 o'clock. I think I'd taken the night off to make sure I purchased the gold edition, the gold copy, it wasn't even a gold copy, the edition of it.
Yeah, the edition.
And failed. My computer would not connect, and it would not go through, and it sold out. And I sat down there thinking I've taken a whole night off work and I still didn't get it right. I'm selling my copy of Promethean Sun. I'm not collecting. Like, I'll get it in normal, fine, whatever. And happened to see 10 minutes later that, a message was put out that some more had been found. The system couldn't cope, and managed to pick up a gold copy. So my huge collection of limited editions and everything is down to them finding a few more. But how was it to the first person to break the Black Library website?
I'm, just your average author, mentally speaking. So I am essentially a bundle of insecurities and internal doubts, fueled by, stereotypically fueled by coffee, with like slivers of awkward arrogance. So the fact that I was the first person to crash the BL site and that they had to buy new servers for the future is like this, like just teeny tiny source of, oh yeah.
Yes, and sorry, Karen.
Yeah, it's so petty, but it was amazing. Although on the other hand, you know how reader facing I am, so to speak. I'm like on a lot of social media.
Yeah.
And I was back then, so I didn't feel good about it the next morning. Let me tell you, because everyone was like hugely disappointed or angry, and I was like, "Oh God, what? I didn't even think about this. I just kind of assumed that it was 1,000 copies back then." I was like, "That's a lot,
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea that. I just assumed everyone who wanted one would easily get one, and yeah, it was. I mean, realistically speaking, your average sci-fi novel that isn't like heavily promoted sells a few thousand copies. Like, that's not uncommon. So when like Aurelian just sold out, and I was like, oh damn. And the thing is, I'd like snootily and arrogantly lectured BL marketing. I was like, you can't make 1,000 of these. You're going to make me look like an idiot. And they were like, yeah, shut up, ADB. And then, yeah, that kind of just blew us all away. So then they released like the extra editions for people.
Yeah.
Which was a great move, I think.
Yes. Yeah. We won't talk about Black Library's decision-making process on this interview. That's other subjects. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
Management changes there a lot.
Yeah,
pendulum swings.
There are issues within that as well, which is, it's all part of the fun, I suppose. But recently we had our second Black Library crash, and that was John.
That's not true.
Is it not? Did it do?
That was the third.
Was it the third? I'm trying to remember now. What was the second?
The second was a Thousand of Horrors.
Oh, it was. Oh, see, I wasn't desperate to get that one. So you did it twice. I forgot about that.
Yay!
Because I'm just a pleb. I picked it up in ebook. Have none of those issues. All right. So doing it again. That's that similar feeling.
It was better in a way because I knew they'd upgraded the servers.
Yeah. Okay. We'll move on before your head gets too big. Did you message John when he did it?
Yeah, I think I did. I can't remember what I said. The thing is, I'm not. You know how I know how I come across sometimes, but I'm not one of those friends who teases their friends very often.
Right.
I don't like doing that, and I can't stand it when my friends do it to me because I have I'm already so insecure about stuff. I have no sense of humor about myself. It's something that I'm constantly trying to improve.
Sure.
So yeah, I messaged him and I think I did try to rag him a little bit, but it's not very convincing in terms of the Solar War, especially because I was one of the first people to read it and I loved it, and I have done nothing but constantly say how much I loved it. And I just knew that was going to take the setting by storm. So I was completely unsurprised. And I was just so happy for him because John is also, well, he's just like me in so many ways. He second guesses the reaction to stuff. And I was just so gratified, but also relieved because I could just shake him by the shoulders now. I was like, see, you had nothing to worry about. See, that was a good moment.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. and we'll have to see what happens when the next one's released. But that's all good. So going back to your stuff, your the ADB fandom's quite passionate, should we say? I think, and one of the main reasons I think for that, and one of the things that comes out when you're looking at people talking about your work, is specific characters. Do you have any idea when you're writing that someone like Latara Sarin or Sevatar stand out from the others?
Usually, no.
Usually.
No, because like Latara Sarin, for example, it's not that her popularity like mystifies me, but to me, I sort of almost see her as what she like represents. Like to me, she is, her character to me isn't like, I don't really know what she looks like in some ways. Like I don't know or care. There are a few details about her appearance that I remember, but to me, she is. She's the answer to the question: what happens if a flag captain / really high-ranking admiral in the heresy fleets has the authority to stand up to Space Marines? She is the answer to that question, because the question interested me. Like, what's it like to be an officer in the World Eaters who has to deal with that?
Yeah, that's completely understandable.
So and because the concept is interesting, I was like fairly certain people would like her, but I didn't expect people to love her the way they do. Sevatar is different, and Sevatar's been around long enough now that I can kind of say this without annoying anyone or disappointing anyone. But Sevatar is every trope I hate.
Right.
In characters. And I'm slowly trying to redeem him. That was when Sevatar didn't even exist. Like me and John talked about him. Right. And I was like, I want this character to be this. He's like all this stuff I hate. He's not necessarily the chosen one tropes, but at the same time he's all the things that are usually like cool about fantasy and sci-fi protagonists. He has all that, but I want to fundamentally like strip him down. For everything he has, it actually backfires for him, and over time, his arc will turn him into the kind of character that I like. That's kind of the point of Sevatar.
Did you ever like those kind of characters?
I did when I was like 12, 13.
Yeah,
yes.
that was exactly my thinking. Was in your, I don't want to disparage any fantasy books, but ones that are less mature have those characters in.
Yeah, see, I specifically like wanted all of that in Sevatar, but even from like day one, the point is I tried really hard to counter it.
Sure.
Like he has that absolute like the trope of the holy fool. He's always completely sure about how he's right and how it's his way or the highway, but half the time he's wrong, or half the time he's acting. I mean, he's a traitor marine, so for a start, he's deluded. He's a Night Lord, so he's doubly deluded. So even when he's speaking truth to power, he's right a lot of the time, but he's also deluded about a lot of his foundational thinking, and he's like sarcastic and wry, and he's got that going for him, but he's like he's terrible at actually relating to people. Brotherhood is a significant factor in a lot of my writing, obviously, because especially about Space Marines, it's like one of the core underpinnings of their life. And so by making Sevatar like cool and funny and stuff, I then dialed back and I stripped him of a lot of the ways that Space Marines actually do belong with each other, like because he's a terrible brother. I mean, he gets obeyed and respected because he's earned his rank, but like no one likes him, and he can't relate to them. Like at one point in the Abyssal Edge, it talks about how he smiles because that's something you're supposed to do at that moment in a social interaction. Like I'm amazed and kind of flattered that people do like Sevatar. but secretly I also go like, he's deeper than that, you know. He's like,
do you? This sounds this will sound bad, but do you think there's a little bit of that wanting that old school, young adult style hero in people then?
I don't know. I kind of instinctively think not. Like, one of the things I hate is when people call like sci-fi and fantasy, like power fantasies or wish fulfillment or escapism, because it's like, well, is it like, if you that anything can be escapism? Like, you don't have to pour a year and a half of your life into something for it to just be like kind of written off as escapism.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's an interesting one, and it's one we'll never know unless a load of people start coming out saying, "Oh, it reminds me of these books I read when I was young." You know, here's my So, which probably isn't going to happen. So, but it's just something interesting to think about. Do you have a favourite character that you've written?
Oh, that's really difficult.
Of course, it is.
Yeah, damn. Kind of. I like, and I assume I'm just like every other author in this, at least all the ones I've talked to, I like weird little things about characters rather than the entire character. Like, I love saying like Skane. I like writing about Skane because I really like saying his name out loud. And Latara as well. I really like her voice in the audio dramas. I can't listen to my own stuff, and I sure as hell can't watch interviews with myself. But that was like one time they played like a moment of Latara at an event, and I heard her, and even though I had no idea who that was or what, it was just on in the background. I was like, That's Latara Sarin. I know that's Latara Sarin, and it was, and that kind of always like stuck with me since then. I really like that. I think probably if you had to like nail it down, it would be. Oh, this is such a difficult question. Zephon in The Master of Mankind.
Yeah.
Because I've wanted to write Blood Angels for like 10 years. And it was just so awesome to be able to do one, especially one in those circumstances where he's just so completely out of his depth, but just still getting on with it, and getting on with it and loyal to the end, even when you've got like Arkan Land being a jerk to him and the custodians looking down on him because he's a space marine and it's his fault that half the galaxy is on fire. It's like, yeah, I really like Zephon.
And yeah, I mean, you put Zephon through a lot, even for a space, well, especially for a space marine in a way, because he's going through things that a lot of other space marines just don't have to deal with.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting one. I don't know what that says about you, but hey, I'll leave that up to someone else to decide, I think, on that one. You talked a little bit about audio there.
Yes.
When you were first approached about doing audio, or did you approach someone? Have you done anything? You haven't done anything beforehand in the audio medium?
I'd written like trailers before.
Oh, sure. Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's like not like proper audio dramas or anything. Right. The first time I was approached was Throne of Lies for the Night Lord series. And then it was soon after that we did The Butcher's Nails for the Heresy. And Throne of Lies especially, I was still in that very new phase of saying yes to everything.
Sure.
And I wrote a short story that was then turned into an audio drama, which turned into really well. So I read the script. It's like, yeah, that's awesome. That's perfect. But I felt really... that was what they wanted, and the short fiction editor at the time asked me to do that. But at the same time, I still kind of felt like I was only like learning half the process. So after that, I talked to Jim a fair bit, and I like researched on actually like formatting scripts for audio, for radio plays. And everything after that, I tried to do properly rather than letting the editors turn it into an audio script. Yeah, it was a whole a whole different art, so to speak.
And how was that getting into that and absorbing all that? You talk, obviously, you're famous for missing deadlines and things like that. Did the challenges of audio bring any more? Was there any more of that involved with doing that, or was it kind of fresh?
Yeah, it was. I always think of two specific things in terms of the difference between audio and like long fiction prose. The first is that characters' voices do so much of the characterization legwork.
Yeah.
Stephen King does this quite a lot, and I do it in some novels. I don't do it in all of them. But like sometimes you'll jump ahead or you'll jump back, and not necessarily like in a flashback, but almost in a kind of like cheeky, and this character X, Y, Z, or and this character once did blah, 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 and that's why they're thinking this. And it's kind of like you take the reader aside and like give them a nudge and go, hey, X, Y, Z. And I love it when Stephen King does that, and I've done it in like 2 or 3 of my novels. But that just critically does not work in audio dramas. It's so it completely breaks the rhythm, and because you're taking them out of the actual emotion, which is the characters' voices and the dialogue, and you're like, hey, by the way, someone wrote this in an office one day, and blah blah blah. It really, really doesn't work. And the other one is that 40K is very bombastic, and that's great in terms of speeches. Like I've done some speeches that I'm so like it's so humbling and flattering to see them like quoted like so often on Reddit or wherever else, where people will write out Angron's speech to Guilliman, or they'll like write out Talos's like speech to the rest of the Night Lords, and that's amazing to see them like resonate like that. But if you try and say them out loud,
sure,
they are so long at times. Like there were a few times in Throne of Lies, because that was my first one, where there are just sentences describing what's happening in the warp, and I'm like, that is a really, really long sentence. And like in prose, it's fine. Yeah. But I just kind of like just cringe thinking of the poor voice actor, like just having to say that. So I learned a lot after my first one. That was the main reason I wanted to do like script it properly. And that's why I learned as well that you have to say audio scripts out loud before you send them in. Because I was like, I don't want to go through that again. It was only like 2 or 3 lines, but I'm really, really precious about.
Sure. How much of?
I mean,
sorry, carry on.
Sorry, carry on.
Kenny Lowell from Combat Phase, his favourite thing about, I think it was Butcher's Nails, was he ended up driving about 70 mile an hour in a 40 or whatever because his foot kept going with the revving of the chain blades. Was the chain blade, was that your direction, or was that added in?
That was one of those things that there was just, you didn't even need to put that in the direction. That was what
sure.
That was what was going to be through 50% of that story.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Did you have much interaction with those guys when they were going, or was it a case of, oh yeah, that looks cool, you do your thing?
Do you mean like the recording?
With recording, yeah.
I am not one of those writers by and large. I finished writing it. Now, you know best what to do with it.
Yeah.
Every time I've like heard stories, or to be honest, once or twice seen writers interacting with their work posthumously, so to speak, like, after they finish writing it and it's being interpreted elsewhere into another medium,
yeah,
I've always thought this is a scene quite lacking in dignity.
Sure.
And perspective. So I'm really careful about it. And plus, I just know it's not my area of expertise. So it's what you trust directors for, really.
Yeah, absolutely. That's completely understandable. Is it? I mean, there's been a few audios now. Is it something that you did and thought, yeah, I want more of that? Yeah,
which is the opposite reaction I thought I'd have. I still can't listen to them.
Sure.
And I know that it's so petty, but the feeling is quite literally like, remember being in assembly in school. Imagine someone was reading out your old love letters. Like, imagine the head teacher was in front of all the other kids reading out your love letters to the school.
Right.
That's that feeling. That oh my God, someone is literally speaking my thoughts out loud right now, and it's so cringy. But I love doing it. I just don't like ever listening to it afterwards.
Yeah, and that's a big aspect of your character as well, though. That's why your interviews at this point in our little series, and everything else as well, isn't it? To be fair, that's very much a part of Aaron, which is not a bad thing. It's just the thing. It just is, But
I work with some very smart guys. Okay, so it's natural for me to be like, well, I don't necessarily think I have as much to say as these guys.
It's not. I say absolutely. It's not a bad thing. It's just that again, like, part of what we've been doing is there are people who are coming to 40k now. I mean, 40k is blown up again. Heresy. There are still people coming into Heresy as proper noobs who don't know the backstory, who don't know, oh, this ADB bloke's written a book I like, and that's their extent of understanding, what you do and who you are. And yet the old timers go, oh yeah, ADB, okay, and then there's stories and things that go with it that people don't know. So I think it's always good to remind people, you're not a fan, you're not someone who's up there, I'll take the plaudits and doing all that. And to be fair, that's not really. I don't know a Black Library author who would do that, but some are much more comfortable. Dan Abnett is very comfortable in any kind of public setting. He's done it for donkey's years, and he's an expert at it, frankly.
Yeah, he is.
If you go and meet Graham at a signing thing, that queue's going to move slower than other people's, because Graham loves to chat to the people he's talking to, and that's great as well. But if you're not that kind of person, and that's that's just something that it's good for people to find out. I think I'm aware that we've been talking quite a while, but I just want to touch on there was another little bit. So listeners to this will know I used to be a firefighter, and recently read Spear of the Emperor. So we're not touching on Heresy, but there's a scene in that which involves fire, which it's those things. Whatever subject you know the most about, when it's on TV or in a book and it's not done right, it jars you completely, and come out of it. And that was the first time I'd read a scene in close space with a fire and thought, yeah, I recognise all that. Are you one of those people who are like, if I'm going to write about this, it has to be bang on? Is that what drives part of those kind of scenes?
Yes.
Is it annoying?
So I just want to say, man, that's like genuinely one of the coolest and most rewarding things anyone has said to me about my career. So thank you for that.
That's right. I assume
that's awesome.
I assume you know a firefighter and you talk to them.
I know several.
Yeah, and it was just, you know how you see Hollywood. Like you say, it is with anything. It's like, oh, they'd never be able to do that kind of thing. What's that? But I mean, it's a terrible example. We watched Baywatch the other night, the new one, and it's hilariously bad, and it's supposed to be. But at one point, there's like, I don't even know how you get to that position. Like, I can understand some places are like, oh, you've got that totally wrong. But this one, I was like, I mean, how even, like, you'd have to go out and purposefully do it, and even then, you'd struggle to do it the way you've done it. Does that kind of, is that a perfection thing, or is it I'm judged on this kind of thing?
It's both. To be honest.
Okay.
I think that you can't separate those two.
Sure.
The two things, because perfectionists
I would say
are fueled by insecurity in a lot of ways, I think.
I would say there are some people who are like, I need to know that I've done it. And there are some people who I need to know that other people know that I've done it. And so there can be a little bit of a difference there. But okay, that's fair enough. Is that, how as a writer, is that one of the most annoying things in the world? Because I would imagine it would be, that you have to get it that right.
It doesn't help my speed. Let's
Sure.
put it that way.
Sure.
The thing is, like, I always, and again, my editors are really patient about this, and so are my friends, to be honest. It's, if you're going to do something, why not make it literally as good as, you want it to resonate with people.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
That's the point of this job. The point of your job isn't to show off how much you know, but it's to resonate with people. And so that's, I mean, one of the people I spoke to, this is when I was a teenager. I was working in a pub, and one of the regulars had been a deck gunner on the HMS Belfast in World War II.
Right. Wow.
And I learned more for 6 months talking to him almost every day. I learned more from him than any amount of movies or video games or about war, anything like that. And that was all of that was like cool and immediately useless in comparison with 6 months of talking to George.
Sure.
And that's the kind of, obviously, like, you don't have, write what you know is like a really oversold axiom, because you don't have, I've never been to space, you don't have to write what you know. You have to write what you can convincingly convey.
A lot of authors would write a lot of very boring books.
Yes, they would.
If they had to do that. And I suppose, in a way, having asked that question now, I think that's possibly a bit unfair, in that I don't want it to make it sound like that you're the only writer that I've heard do that. I've heard Dan talk.
No, of course not.
I've heard Dan talk about some of the people some of the combat vets and stuff that he talked to for his various books, and has received, I've heard similar things, said to him about that kind of stuff as well. And maybe this is coloured purely by the fact that it's something I've actually got experience with. So, there is that, but it's, I had a feeling that it was a thing for you, as it were. I think that there are levels of getting it right, I suppose. And perfectionism to that extent, you can understand why books are late, I suppose.
That is a really, really nice thing to say. I thought you were going to be like mean to me. I always assume you're going to be like mean and tease me or something.
A lot of people do. I think it's just because I've got no hair and I'm a big guy and sometimes wear football tops. Okay, we'll move on with the interview.
Wait, bouncing back actually to what Dan said.
Sure.
A lot of soldiers read Black Library books. A lot of soldiers. I would put a good 10% of my personal feedback correspondence, on social media, with soldiers. So that I had no idea about that going into it, and so that's definitely something that I know we're all aware of. One of the things I get, and I don't mean this in like a "hey, look at me" kind of way. I just mean to give an example. The concept of brotherhood in the army with people who you actually hate.
Right, yeah.
I get a fair amount of feedback saying that I nailed that right.
Oh, sure.
And that's because I talk to a lot of soldiers about it.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing, interesting concept to me. And Space Marines would have that in spades. And so would the Imperial Guard, obviously.
I can't.
So Dan's definitely done his work there as well.
Yeah, I can't imagine that concept to that level. I mean, again, as a firefighter, there are times when you get on with things and whatever, and we've had situations that aren't that have happened that have been pretty not good, and with people that you don't like. But to be in a combat environment, and to be out there in another country and everything else, that would blow my mind. But yeah, that's really cool to hear, actually, and it's some I know a few guys, and maybe something I asked them a bit more about. Right, so we talked a little bit about favourite characters and stuff. Now we saw, I actually did a little bit of a Google search earlier on images, and there was a really cool. So at Adepticon we had a wonderful Latara Sarin cosplay.
Oh, yeah.
It was absolutely fantastic. There was another one I saw on Google Images of a young girl doing it. It was amazing. It was really cool. What's the craziest thing a fan's done?
Oh, there's quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are degrees of crazy. Oh, actually, one of the Latara Sarins made a Night Lord's helmet for my son.
Yeah, and brought it all the way over the Atlantic for you as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's sat on the shelf behind me now. I don't let Shakes play with it because obviously he was like 4 when he got it, and he's 7 now, so I know he'll break it. It's you get a lot of presents, you get a lot of people making minis of your armies. This is going to sound really like bland, but it's incredible to me that I have one, and still only one, handwritten letter, handwritten fan mail.
All right.
And I keep it in my top drawer of my desk, and that to me is still insane because I can't. The last time I wrote a letter was when I was like a kid, and my mum said, "Write back to your relatives and say thank you for your Christmas present."
Sure. Yeah.
I can't think of the time that I've actually handwritten. It's like it's handwritten, and it sounds like nothing, but it's everything.
That's
because
really cool.
you get like 20 messages a day in your inboxes going, "Thank you for X," or "This was good," or whatever. But someone like just taking the time to write it out and say, I wanted to frame it, but that's just I worry that's tacky and like self-aggrandizing.
No, it's
but it's
not.
just so cool to have. It's like just blew me away.
Awesome. That's really cool. And then, so in the first of these interviews I did, I was talking to Dan, and in a roundabout way, I asked him a question that's been adapted. It's been misspoken a lot of the times. But if you could, was there a single story that you were like, I wanted to write that? Not that whoever wrote it did it badly, not or it hasn't been written or whatever. Was there a like, if I could go back and reset the clock, that I know I'd be asking to do X story? And is it the one I think you're going to say?
That's difficult because there is, but
do you get to do part of it in the future?
Well, there's two, and
Sure.
I don't mean that in like a cheating way. I mean there's a heresy one, and then there's a Siege of Terror one.
Okay, yeah.
And I genuinely couldn't have picked between them if like you held a gun to my head. The one I wanted to do more than anything else ever was Sanguinius at the Eternity Gate.
Sure.
That's always been the one I've wanted to do. But obviously that's a siege story, and who knows how the siege will play out. Insert mystery music here. The one I desperately wanted to do, and I know everyone often thinks that it's Fear to Tread, but it's not, because I never really thought that was the Blood Angels like shining moment of awesomeness.
Right.
That was always the ultimate gate, like the Eternity Gate. It was Prospero.
Huh?
I went into my first heresy meeting desperate to do Prospero, and I had no idea that it was already like scheduled, and Dan and Graham were discussing the writing of Prospero in my first meeting. And I was like, fudge. Because I would absolutely, and I know everyone loves the Thousand Sons, and they're a very, very forgiving legion because they're so incredibly popular. They're the reasonable traitors. They're the ones who arguably did nothing wrong, even though obviously they did.
Yeah, obviously.
And they have like the most fantastic, unique powers, and they have, everyone loves Thousand Sons. So there's almost no downside to writing them. You could write fairly average Thousand Sons fiction, and still everyone would still love it because it's the Thousand Sons.
Sure.
Luckily, I think Prospero Bones and a Thousand Sons are freaking awesome. So I'm not disparaging the other guys when I say you can write bland stuff, but you got to remember, going into my heresy meeting, my first ever heresy meeting, I was terrified, and the idea of like the cushioning of a beloved legion was like almost like a security blanket in a way. That was one of the I badly wanted to tell the story anyway. That was just the one that was in my head all the time. But there was I won't lie, there was the security blanket of and everyone loves them already, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, well, that's understandable. I completely see that. Brilliant. I think we're done asking you questions. I mean, I could go on all night. We've hardly touched on the other stuff you've done. Although people can go back and listen to the previous interview for stuff around the Emperor. What's his name? Sorry, apologies, Master of Mankind. And Betrayer we didn't touch on at all, but
And the Master of Mankind is weird. Like the reception for it now, compared to when we first recorded, a few weeks after it was out or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I was I was a bit worried then, because obviously 4chan and a couple of subreddits had been like, is ADB changing all this stuff? And obviously I wasn't, because I'm terrified to change anything. But now it's incredibly well reviewed, and I should be happy, but I'm just relieved.
Did Laurie Golding take a lot of the pressure off by writing what he wrote?
Do you mean the shorts?
Yeah, because there's been 3 or 4 shorts now that have followed on from Master of Mankind, which have expanded on aspects of that book.
The wrong aspects.
Well, no, but they've taken an element of that book and they've provided questions and whatever people's take are of those pieces. They have provided a different kind of chat about those aspects.
I spent 18 months being extremely careful with that book.
Right.
I was careful not to say anything declaratively. I didn't want to change anything. I just wanted to gather up everything that we did have and then present it in the context of characters who were seeing it through their own eyes.
Right.
Pure subjective, pure context immersion, which is why I don't believe in teasing the readership. So when sometimes a short story will come out that leans heavily into teasing, and I'll be like, oh, I know it's popular and I know people love it, but it's just not for me.
That's fair enough. I do think that if it's going to happen, it's better happening in a short.
Yes.
So definitely. I think that way round is if it had been in a novel, there would have been a more interesting chat. But yeah, that's a whole nother subject for another time. I think that just those little bits. What are you working on at the moment?
Oh gosh,
that you can tell us about.
I've almost finished the sequel to Spear of the Emperor.
And I just want to say again, if people haven't read Spear of the Emperor, go and read Spear of the Emperor.
Thanks, man.
That's all right. I'll push that book all day. It was awesome.
I'm so proud of that one. It's weird because it's Spear of the Emperor and the sequel, The Ashes of Spoilers, and the third one, which is currently unnamed. They are, I think I might call the third one Homeworld. I'm not sure. They are I'm kind of writing them for me.
Right.
They're like 40K that I want to read, rather than I have ideas for X or it's this is a lot of the historical fiction that I read. I'm like, okay, I want to do that in 40K. So I've almost finished the sequel, which is called The Ashes of Spoilers. What's next? I'm actually spinning around in my chair to look at my.
Well, we know you're doing a Siege of Terror book at least.
Yes,
we're all guessing that it's a Siege of Terror book.
It is a Siege of Terror book, and I have a few months where I'm going to. I need to write Black Legion 3 next, which I will do imminently.
Oh, so that's because that was one you said before that you weren't. The changes to the 40K law. Affected your view of that series. But that's something you now feel that you want to crack on with it.
A lot of stuff was in flux.
Sure, absolutely.
And there was some. It's a huge company. There's always going to be miscommunication, but this was purely a lot of structural stuff was in flux. That since then we've made loads of strides, and we'll start to see stuff linking up a lot neater. Yes, all my reservations about what do I write about, and is X Y, and is A B, all that's kind of gone. And I need to get cracking, because I've got I've got so many ideas for that series, and I don't always want it to be in the past. I want to start to get I want to push on through the 10 millennia.
Awesome.
I'm aware that my Siege novel deadline the start date is like getting closer and closer. I know loads of people have worked out what I'm writing, especially from the photo shoot.
Right.
We did that awesome like Game of Thrones Vanity Fair photo shoot.
Yeah.
And loads of people have worked out which one I'm doing. And obviously I've said like from day one that the only book that I would say no to ever would be, hey, do you want to write the last one?
Yeah.
No. So I'm not doing the last one. But that's all I can say.
Awesome. We won't press you too hard on the record anyway. So we can do that. And you've also got we might as well mention Road to Jove. That's still.
Oh man, that's been like offline for ages because we are doing a whole new website and everything.
But there's I want to kind of plug it out there again, just in case people aren't aware that you've done it.
I'm so proud of that. I just wish we were faster with it, but the problem is like I have like a squillion things on the go, and David, the artist, we did an experiment once where it came down to, okay, this is what it looks like when it takes him like a week to do one page of the webcomic. And it's like, I could do it faster, but it looks like this. And it was still good. And then he was like, okay, this is what it looks like if I do it really fast. And it was still kind of good. But the point of it is, like, we want it to be perfect. Like, you can tell how much effort goes into that webcomic. Like, if I had to pay David, I would have bankrupted myself by now, because he does so much work on it, and he like lovingly paints every page. So. But it's slow. But thank you for plugging it, because we're so proud of it.
That's right, and I know you are, and I know anything like that. We regularly get questions to the After Illinois Twitter or Facebook. Are you guys still going? Yes, we'll record when we're ready. We have jobs and families and other podcasts and everything else that goes with it. I completely understand that kind, and I'm totally disorganised, as any listener of the show will know. So just trying to figure out a date to chat is sometimes difficult, but I fully appreciate the effort that goes into those things. But yeah, I think we've covered everything. Unless you want to, there's nothing. I doubt there's anything else you can tell us about that's coming out. Do you still do some work? I don't even know if you're allowed to talk about this. Do you do still some of that script writing for GW?
Oh, I did a bunch of the Warhammer TV trailers.
Oh, cool.
No, not anymore.
Sure, no worries.
I'm NDA'd up. So much right now.
It's
I've
always
got
worth
some other
asking.
stuff on the boil, so to speak, but I can't talk about any of it. Like even to hint about it.
That's fair enough. You can go and find out that information firsthand. Follow you on Twitter, and usually things crop up, don't they, from there?
I have a big mouth.
Yes. Well, and even that's where you'll officially announce stuff as well. If you can follow GW, but also you'll post up sometimes. Oh yeah, I did a thing. And if you, and as you say, you're still active on some of the forums occasionally.
I try to be. I'm quite active on the 40k lore subreddit right now.
I can't do Reddit, but just can't.
Oh, they're nice. I promise they're nice.
You haven't read the ones that review this show. There are some real pearlers in there, and I love reading them. But yeah, so I think that's part of why when, again, for those listeners who aren't as deep as haven't had the history of reading up about authors and things like that all goes with our hobby. I don't blame authors for not going to those places, but you have been there in the past, and that's created this this kind of people's view of you, and also like the way people perceive you, which, and it's weird because sometimes I sit there and think, oh, here we go, there's some ADB fans in the room, and sometimes I'm like,
yeah, those are erudite and discerning souls.
Yeah, and some of them really are, and then some of them are more interesting, shall we say? But it's part of being in a hobby online, isn't it?
The weird thing is, and this is a truth for all creative people, and to be honest, I'm sure you know about it reading your own reviews for this show. You don't see the good ones. Your eyes just gloss over it. So if someone's being nice to you, you never see them. Like you focus on the 1 in 100 that calls you, X, Y, Z.
Yeah, it's.
I have a policy in posting online. If someone doesn't like my work, I don't care. If someone likes my work, I don't comment. If someone is lying about my work or getting it wrong, then I'll be like, I think you're fine.
I have a similar. Well, I will comment on stuff because sometimes I love it when people hate my work. But when people are getting things wrong, I think that's more important to kind of interject on.
And not in a holier than thou way. I mean, purely in like, hey, did he mean X? I'd be like, no, he meant Y. And although sometimes X is a really good angle, and I'll be like, actually, that's a good point. I might use that later.
Yeah, and the other thing as well is, I think when it comes to reviewing someone's livelihood effectively, or talking about someone's livelihood, I know that I will jump on and say, you do realise you're reviewing that book incorrectly. Like,
that's a fair point.
You're allowed to review it bad, that it's bad or good or whatever, but you've got to review what was actually put out.
Yeah,
and that's
fair.
Yeah, that's one thing where I must admit I do jump on it and go, hold on, but it's all good. And we could ramble on for ages, so we'll cut it off there. We'll see you at an event somewhere, I'm sure.
I suspect so.
And maybe another. I did see your little Twitter message about trying to get onto Voxcast.
Oh, on the contrary, I was like trying to play ball.
Yeah, we could read under that between the lines. It's all good.
Because I was so like, how do I answer this?
You say yes, absolutely, so they can get more authors on there. It's good. Wade is good. It's a good show.
It's a great show. I listen to it when I'm doing the morning chores with the kids.
So everyone needs to message Wade Price and tell him that Aaron needs to come on the show.
You don't have to. We've booked it.
Excellent. Even better. Even better. So we'll leave it there, and we'll hear from you on a podcast somewhere else soon. Cheers, Aaron. Well, you've made it to the end of another episode. Again, sorry this one was just a little bit late. We tried to record, as Neil said, he wasn't feeling great, and that delayed everything. Unfortunately, everything got delayed about 3 days because the way things work out. I really hope you guys have enjoyed the author interviews we've done. Kind of calling this little mini set done. That doesn't mean we aren't going to get people back on. I'm sure. Give it a bit of time. We'll swing round for those again. We have something, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got something booked in which is a little bit different for the show for next episode. So I hope you enjoyed that as well. We're planning on that, looking at trying to implement a few of those changes I talked about a while ago. If you do have feedback, feel free to send it in, greg@theimperialtruth.com. If you like what we do, go and tell some people. It's always good. Saw a couple of iTunes reviews as well. They always help. Thank you guys for doing those. And if you really like what we're doing, of course, we have the Patreon as well. You can jump on there. Another reminder about the Cardiff event. There's, we got Frontline 30k, but also the chance potentially to play Zone Mortalis or Centurion or Adeptus Titanicus all under one roof, all within one event. And keep an eye on Twitter and Instagram and whatever, and I'll try and kind of catalogue me putting together some terrain and painting it, because I've got a lot of stuff going on that needs to be done. Time ticks away very, very quickly. But I'm not going to bang on, as you could probably guess, when it's just me by myself. That tends not to happen. Just thank you once again for listening, and you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.